Guys, gear up fast. We're about to get evil. Enemies dropping into the AO.
It is Spring 51!
Enemy soldier incoming. All stations, this is Shadow 01. Deployment to the war zone.
Shadow 01.
Review on the laptop.
Alright. We're looking at... Huh. I guess it's Factory A, or... Might as well know. Do the... Yeah?
Yep.
Alright.
Resurgence. Survive to redeploy fallen teammates. Kill.
Money or the card?
Do the money.
Okay.
Yeah. Second level?
Yeah. Nothing here, going inside.
Ready, kids.
She jumped down this.
UAV heading your way.
Nice.
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
See your money?
Wait.
Brother! Get him, dog.
I'll throw the loadout near the card.
There's one, Brett.
Hostile mosquito is online.
Wait.
There's one.
Keep 6 up top here.
Loadout drop headed your way.
Oh yeah, they got the card for sure.
There's one.
How's it going, son? You feel okay today?
Yep.
Alright.
Want to try to get to second floor?
Sure.
Someone's got their drones here. People are here.
Wait. Oh, I'm okay.
Down one.
Alright. Awesome.
Only 25 left.
Wait.
One a second.
Alright.
Alright, your squad's in the safe zone. Watch the cluster mine.
People at the buy station and near industries. Someone's going on the
Here's
roof.
some good.
Hostiles deploy the mosquito. Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies. Friendly loadout drops on the way. Flyover. Aerial surveillance is up and at 'em.
At
Use your
first we
tac
did
map to
that
steer clear.
little running test.
Oh, getting
thing,
spotted somewhere
thing
outside.
where you,
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that is good.
We're
Did
in
you
the
do,
recon.
sorry?
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Where you run back.
Ooh, jeez. Yeah.
I did a little bit of it, but
Want to fight the people upstairs?
Sure.
Okay.
up when you're in the end.
Recon drones
Hey.
flying in for another pass. Watch your position.
Somebody hit the cluster downstairs. Just turning back.
You're in the path of incoming patrols. Get out of there, soldier.
They ran right through. Trippy.
Did you play dodgeball, did you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody's right below us to our right? Or is he on the water tower? He is. Yeah, going back. He's in the water tower.
That's good.
All squad members are in the safe zone.
But 2 more days over here. This armored, the bullet thing from that.
Almost had him.
Yeah.
Ammo here!
Chasing him back.
Fire sale active. Buy station prices have.
One's right behind me.
More risk, more reward.
Around to the side.
Oh, yeah,
Go
yeah.
get hunting. Down to you, soldier. Stay sharp.
But he was up top.
Strike in the area.
I'll get him.
Resurgence is about to end. Make it count. You got reinforcements inbound.
This
You can get your stuff.
okay.
Shut off. It's just half a wrap.
I see him. There's a Michael on this side.
You're losing ground. Move it.
Target down!
We located the rest of them. Your squad made it to the safe zone. Fire sale's over. Adjusting prices.
Taking effective fire!
2 people in tower.
That guy.
Must have fixed how the mono bullets go through the walls.
Resurgence has been deactivated.
Need a res.
Oh, I'm coming. I'm coming.
Don't worry.
We can go back inside.
Oh, yes.
I'm good. I'm good. Just watch out. Something.
Oh. Sorry.
It's all good.
There's a value.
There's back here.
Ahead of us.
Just gonna have a quick toke.
You know what? Time to abuse Bert now. Today was good. That first thing that last first time.
Yeah, as long as you want.
You're headed to the war zone. Get geared up and stand by. Prep time's over. Now you deploy to the war zone. Enemies drop.
Trying to do ship or factory?
Resurgence.
Probably factory.
Stay alive to keep your squad in the
All right.
fight.
Sometimes there's money right on the backside here,
Right.
on this top level.
Stuck that landing.
Sometimes it's like right here at this time.
On the way.
Oh, you did the bucket. Oh.
Failure ain't fatal. It's just an opportunity to do better.
Damn.
Use this time for some target practice. Real thing's coming soon. Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Yeah.
Playtime's over. Stand by for deployment of the war zone.
Just getting made about 5 days ago. Okay. Oh, you want to try for bio or
Survive to redeploy.
you just want to part of it?
Oh, mine's good.
All right. Yeah, that's right.
Box UAV is inbound.
They always go for the roof, eh?
Yeah.
That squad on your attack map. Get hunting.
Oh, okay, the card on him.
Let's see. Yeah, somebody has a card. Maybe they took it
I
and
got it.
ran. Okay.
Hostile mosquitoes online.
Oh, someone's landing over here.
Moving here.
Buddy's coming.
How did they get a shield?
Yeah. Probably found the red box.
Nice. Oh, get it.
Oh, damn.
Oh no.
So many people here.
Oh damn. GG, GG.
Yeah.
Return to base for debrief.
Think I could try and load up a shield or what? Yeah.
So, yeah.
That replace one of your primary shield, and you can buy it straight off the bat.
Nice. What should I do?
Either Gorilla Zone or Loadout 4.
Bless you. This one good enough?
Yep.
Check your gear and weapons. We'll be deploying shortly.
Oh.
All stations, this is Shadow 01. Deployment to the war zone has been authorized.
Thanks. Awesome.
We got the green light. We're
It
going to
was
war zone.
Chappie.
Grab your gear and shoot. We're up in 3.
Yeah.
Activity will be high. Contact early
Happy.
Let's roll.
I'm at the mercy of my time.
Resurgence. Stay alive to keep your squad in the fight.
And Godspeed. Godspeed.
Not sure where to land. Let's see.
These guys do.
Vehicle marked.
These guys do.
Over here.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What is this?
Ready, kids? Got a supply box UAV heading your way. Your squad mates redeploying. Well done.
Fire over here.
Holy.
Get ready. You're redeploying.
Fuck is this sneaky little bastard? Holy. Little amped, are we? Little amped? Yeah.
Can I get a hell yeah?
Oh, good.
Get this, brother.
But he got that guy.
Enemy soldier incoming.
I can't see any name tags. I only see a dot above people's heads.
Got this, boys. Remember, Pete, I taught you.
I got this.
Remaining operators. Go get your revenge. Enemies deployed a counter UAV. All right, your squad's in the safe zone.
Oh, someone's here, Chief.
Secure the supply boxes. Locations are marked on your attack map.
Oh.
There's an enemy.
Oh. Whew. Hiding in that bathroom. Oh, there he goes. Oh, snap.
He's lucky the smoke was there.
I hear.
You got a loadout drop inbound. You're getting another case. Make it count. Hostiles deployed a mosquito.
Mm-hmm. He's actually a taco eater.
You got reinforcements inbound.
Those stupid taco munchers.
I'm not doing it, Chief. I'm not doing it.
Marked on your attack map. A couple contracts out there have increased payouts. Do them first to cash out.
Doing what, you may ask? Try to go for that loadout. There's no way.
Failed, objective lost. We lost the supply cache locations. Contracts pulled.
Alright.
Recon's gonna pass right over you. Relocate, pronto.
Loadout's clear.
Alright. I'm doing.
Recon drones caught your position. You're compromised. You are in
Wow.
range. Enemy has
Got a
your
shield,
location.
Chief.
Nice.
Surveillance is coming back around. Steer clear.
Now, who wants it? Who wants some?
Gotta get to circle.
Alright. Coming.
Gas is closing in.
Who had they milk? Out.
Whoa.
Run!
Whoa.
The fast way down.
Whoa.
People are around us.
Run!
Oh.
Your squad made it to the safe zone.
Got trapped. Been wall on the ceiling.
Look on some stairs.
Yeah. Don't ask me how.
Being tracked by an enemy squad. Survive.
Got this.
Alright.
The enemy is no longer tracked. You've lost. Time for vengeance. You're redeploying.
Whole team inside that place.
Yeah, there's 2 teams in there.
Fire sale is active. Buy station for your bang. Target down. Marking the rest. Located the rest of them.
Good job.
On your tac map. Go get hunting.
One's flying up top to the
Deploying supply drop to your location.
above us. So,
Located the rest of them.
another one here.
Get
Oh.
ready. Resurgence window is about to close.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, quit lying. You lying, you lying. Oh. Whoa.
Operators from that squad. Hunt them down. Stay alive so your squad can redeploy. Confirmed and we
So
locate
many
Ooh.
people there. It's crazy.
Headshot, I got a headshot.
are back to normal.
Oh shit.
Good work. Target down. Marking the rest of them. Be advised, insurgents is no longer active. This is for keeps. Hostiles
Far left.
You've got reinforcements
Good
inbound.
there. Guys still spotting us. Going further left.
Wait.
Hostile mosquito is online.
That's right.
Got gas moving in. 25 remaining.
Jumping down.
The safe zone is far from your
They're gonna be
location.
above us.
Get moving, pronto.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Insurgents has closed.
Oh, good.
No more second chances.
Someone in tunnel sniping.
Enemies dropping into the AO.
Ooh, he's good sniping. No. Not at all.
I don't even part of that place around there.
For shit.
Gas is inbound.
Indeed, the glitch chief.
Yeah.
Girlfriend.
Testing, testing.
Hello, hello, hello.
Doesn't seem to be connecting there, cuz. I think I'm just gonna take a break anyways.
You gonna take a break?
Yeah. Gotta do some work on the
Okay,
computer
okay.
soon.
Okay, okay. Hope you have good luck with the work on your computer.
Thanks, cuz.
It's the holidays at Wayfair.
Y'all, it's a gift swap. You gotta swap your gifts.
But this pillow is so me.
Yes, that's because you brought it.
No.
Come on, y'all. This is exactly what I was wishing for.
Perfect swap.
My turn.
What the
Fudge.
Now that's a holiday classic.
Just like you. You got a place for that?
I got something in mind.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Nav is a legendary day trader, known for making millions out of his parents' bedroom. Yet few know the truth behind his early trading and his battle against the Matrix. To flee from a life of poverty in India, before Nav was born, his family fled to London, UK. But immigrating to a Western country didn't mean it was easier to get opportunities. Now, as a self-made day trading millionaire, Nav's eyes are set on forever changing the financial markets. Nav's parents bought a house in Hounslow in 1982, a few years after arriving from Punjab, India. Because it's next to the airport, house prices are cheap. His parents worked lots of jobs to make ends meet. It was the only way they could send Nav to a great college. They hoped it would improve his future. In 2001, Nav went to college to study computer science and math. To help lower the rent, Nav rented together with a couple of roommates. One of his roommates always had extra cash on him. Wanting to make more cash himself, Nav asked him where he got it. His roommate explained he had deposited a student loan into a brokerage account, and he was using the money to trade tech stocks. Realizing he could make more than a local supermarket job, Nav was fascinated. Soon after, Nav went online and started learning everything he could about trading. See, Nav had an obsessive nature. In high school, Nav was obsessed with FIFA, playing hours on end. climbing to the top 200 players worldwide. Repeatedly playing against the same top players, Nav focused allowed him to pinpoint individual players' habits and develop counter strategies. If players played aggressively over the left wing, he changed into a four-man defensive position with his best defender on the right. As he read up more on trading, Nav opened his account, placing small personal trades and losing most of it. But it was a fair price to pay to gain the experience he needed. It wasn't until 2 years after uni that Nav made a decision that will forever change his destiny. Still living in a bedroom in his parents' house, Nav was working odd jobs. First working a job doing telesales at a company called Dialaphone, then an admin job at Bank of America, mostly to help chip in for his parents when paying for groceries and bills. One evening, Nav opened the local newspaper when an ad caught his eye. Wanted, futures traders must work well under pressure. Seeing his parents struggle over the years and wanting to support them more financially, Nav worked to get the job. His goal? Make more money day trading than Warren Buffett. Trading firm IDT, that's where Nav applied. IDT wasn't exactly high finance. Picture Peaky Blinders, but gambling on stocks instead of horse races. To get in, Nav had to pass a grueling application. First, they got a 3-part test. Part 1, a quick mental agility test. Part 2 was a test for pattern and recognition. And finally, the few who survived all that were grilled in a final interview on hypothetical trades. In May 2003, Nav and a few remaining survivors met in the office for the first time. Most of them were in their early 20s. Together, they faced months of simulation, theoretical explanations, trading psychology, and Paulo telling his war stories.
The price ladder. This I'm excited to show you because a lot of you probably never actually seen what order flow looks like. This is what we execute on. 80% of our trades come from what we see there. Why? Because that's the raw market. Everything you see in charts, in anything you read in articles, whatever it is, that's an extrapolation of what the market is, that this is the market. Bids on the left, price column in the middle, offers on the right. This is what we look at on a daily basis. In this video, I'm going to show you a month-end trade. On month ends, our traders really push their size because on month end is where institutions, hedge funds, pension funds, changing their books, trying to book in their profits. That's where you see a lot of order flow. So let's take a look real quick. You see at 44s, he saw seeing a buyer. He buys 80 lots. Now every tick is 800 euros. He sees a bit of a seller come in around, I'm seeing a bit of a seller at 46, 47. He's probably going to offer 47s. He offers 40 at 47s. He gets filled. He's trying to get 48s. He tries offering 48s, doesn't get them. He offers 47s again. A seller's coming in. He's leaving his offer in so that he can try and sell this. This is in minuscule time frames. Not even 5 seconds. That was 2,400 euros. This is the kind of price action we watch. The interaction between the bids and the offer. How the market's interacting with each other. When you see that price action, how are you reacting? How are you getting involved? And so sometimes, I mean, not all the time are we trading such big size, but when you know you can feel the edge in the price action, that's where you want to be pushing it.
After 8 weeks of tireless training, the rookies were close like brothers. They were finally ready to face the markets. "8 hours on a lone desk, he traded. He talked to no one. Besides the founder's office, everyone else sat together. The office news blasted through loudspeakers. Nav hated the negativity and the rowdiness of the office. He saw the importance of keeping his mind clear as he traded. His coworkers described him as absent-minded, sometimes starting his trading days forgetting to take his bike helmet off. Nav chased profitability. Nav started his trading in the S&P 500 E-mini futures. He arrived at the office at 2 p.m. till 9 p.m. to trade the U.S. markets. Between trades, he often did pull-ups or played football manager on his phone. Nav's trading strategy was scalping, in and out multiple times every day. Unlike others, he didn't use stop losses. He called it letting his trades breathe. While riskier, it allowed some of his losers to rebound. It also meant he had to stay focused for hours on end. Nav didn't rely on traditional chart reading techniques or patterns. He didn't believe in them. Instead, his obsession lay in the latter. In video games like FIFA, his strongest opponents had habits in their playing style. Nav's focus was on identifying their habits until he found an opening. In trading, he did the same. He focused on watching the latter movements. Despite digital trading being anonymous, people had habits, recurring volume sizes and plays. By only trading the S&P 500 E-mini futures, he started recognizing the movements of its market makers. 9 out of 10 orders were never filled. Bluffs were everywhere. He was competing against the greatest traders across the globe. In 2005, IDT, the firm, relocated to Woking and named itself Futex. The firm was doing well, hiring more recruits. While the firm was doing well, not everybody was happy. The firm's founder was a man named Paolo Rossi. He founded it alongside his brother, Marco Rossi, and Dan Goldberg. Paolo had made his money trading futures in the London pits in the 80s. Now, he lived in a mansion and drove a Ferrari to the office. To inspire the newbies, of course. While some gravitated towards his charisma and his war stories, Nav didn't. Nav wanted to become the greatest day trader in the world, and he didn't think Paolo's experience would help him at all. Nav didn't fear his bosses. In fact, he thought they held him back. See, Marco Rossi was in charge of day-to-day management, and depending on the trader's performance, he would give them different capital and risk limits. Every time Nav achieved high returns, he would march down to Marco's office, demanding higher amounts of capital and higher risk limits. They often got into heated debates and cussed each other out in front of the whole trading floor. In fact, Nav would chew out anybody who dared to touch his enormous pride as a day trader. Paulo, Marco, other traders, nobody was safe. Nav knew the only reason they put up with it is because he backed it up with his trades. While some might view this as a toxic relationship, that forced limiter on Nav's pride and his unwavering confidence as a trader gave him time to fine-tune and improve his skills as a trader. The risk limits helped contain his aggression, and to get Marco to give him more money to trade with, he was constantly challenged to improve his skills. But while his trading skills were growing, so was his frustration. He could no longer hold them back. Nav vocalized his pride as a trader and his frustrations with society on the forums. That's the Fugazi. That was his name on the popular day trading forums, with a picture of the Joker as his avatar. He often shared his views on common trading theories like Ralph Walton Elliott, known for his Elliott Waves and the Elliott Waves Principle book. Although markets appear random, they affect repeating patterns of nature and Fibonacci numbers. Nav thought this was unconvincing and extremely limiting to rely on such a technique. Same goes for William Gant. He used principles from astrology and geometry for trading. Nav gave him even less of a thought. Even a 12-year-old could use this. He viewed the world as a matrix. After 4 years of perfecting his scalping on the S&P 500 E-mini futures, Nav had built up an account size of 400K. He had built up a rep where most don't even survive a day. Till one day, some odd ladder movements had caught his attention. the news of an impending financial crisis in late January, early afternoon, Nav was at his desk. The S&P 500 had gone from moving 50 ticks to moving 5% a day. The financial news was bleeding into the markets. In the corner of his eyes, he noticed irregularities in the DAX, an index that tracks Germany's top 30 companies. He had recently started to play around with it for when the US market closed. Despite the negativity in the markets, Nav noticed there was a pile of buy orders waiting on the DAX ladder, and whenever the orders hit, they replenished. He had never seen anything like it, but then again, he wasn't a DAX expert. That's where Nav's comrade comes in, fellow Futex trader Young. Young joined Futex around the same time as Nav. He was the more charismatic of the two, often buying new rookies drinks on Friday nights. Young traded the DAX, it was his hunting grounds. Yet, he was also surprised. During the evening, when most markets went down, the DAX crept up. Somebody kept buying. Nav and Young noted that the market the following morning was 90 drops lower. Whoever was buying had given up. It was unbelievable. So they decided to build a strategy around it and short it overnight. They hit gold. For 2 weeks, they repeated the trade, hoping their luck would continue. Surged on by his wins, Young continued to trade the DAX throughout the day and gave a lot of his profits back, while Nav let it breathe and doubled down on his winning strategy. By mid-January, Nav's account balance had blown up to £1 million. On Saturday, January 19th, 2008, news came out about a 31-year-old French trader, Jerome Kerviel. He spent his nights using the bank's money to buy longs on the DAX illegally until the financial risk team detected him. After an inspection, the bank realized $7.2 billion had been burned away by Jerome Kerviel. When the news came out, the DAX sunk further. While the bank was near bankruptcy, Nav's account had reached a new level. But as he progressed, so did the system he fought. As some of you might know, around 2007 is when the market started to change. One morning at Futex, Nav started noticing peculiar movements in the ladder. The office was rowdy as a lot of his colleagues seemed to be on a losing streak that day. But it wasn't just that day. The months that followed were the same. Despite becoming a bigger player, Nav struggled to read the ladder. Spoof orders, faster fills, the market were changing. His opponents became so skilled that Nav thought they could see through the ladder. In reality, his opponents were no longer human. While Futex was hiring new recruits, others hired coders. Firms like GetCo and Jump Trading, early quants. By 2008, the quants had become so effective, they became 1 in 5 trades. It didn't take long for exchanges to offer quants huge commission cuts. See, exchanges take commissions off every trade. Robots making thousands of trades per second are way more profitable. And these same exchanges are the ones responsible for policing traders. Founders of the CME group, like board member William Shepard, for example, was also a large shareholder in quant firms Jump Trading. They were the same people, Citadel and Jump. Faster scalping speeds and lower commissions, human players no longer had a chance. If a trade made the wrong move, it was the algos. It squeezed many scalpers out of the market. Nav hated the quants. To him, they weren't robots, they were the rich. How could he compete with a bunch of faceless billionaires? The markets were no longer a level playing field, where if you had a skill set, you can make money and change your destiny. Nav, like other traders, blamed a lot of his losses on the algos. While he didn't know it at the time, later he would learn some of the trades he complained about the most turned out to be human scalpers. Nav's frustration for trading grew, and so did his aggression towards authority. Nav's anger reached a boiling point. He went on strike. Frustrated with the markets, Nav felt the 90-10% split he was getting at Futex wasn't good enough. After getting into heated debates with Marco, things were getting ugly. Nav was starting to disrespect his bosses in front of other traders. Things had become unrepairable. After receiving a notice from the tax authorities, Nav's paranoia blamed his bosses. He wanted out. Over the years of Futex, he had built an account size of 3 million. It was time to cash out. But the brothers refused to let him go. claiming they first wanted to make sure the tax authorities were happy. After Nav got a big-ticket lawyer involved, the bosses cracked and gave Nav his money. Having lost his only form of a mentor and the limiter on his trading risk, the pitbull was now off the chains. After the fight, Nav was more frustrated than ever. His autistic nature made him even more paranoid, and he felt like the government was out to get him. Soon after, indirectly, Nav met some new affiliates and a man who went by the name Mr. Jesus. Mr. Jesus approached Nav with an opportunity to manage his money. He promised exponential growth, with annual returns of around 30% and a promise to eliminate his tax bill. Liking the sound of what he had to offer, Nav agreed to partner up. On Thursday, November 20th, 2008, the S&P closed at the lowest level in a decade. After finding himself a new broker at GNI, Nav rented a desk at CFT, a trading firm located next to the Tower of London. The financial crisis was peaking. 2 months had passed since the Lehman collapse, and reports came in the US government would step in. That Friday morning, Nav started buying futures. After a turbulent morning, things started to pick up. The following weeks, the markets rallied even harder. As news came out that the Treasury announced they would be putting trillions of dollars into Citigroup, Nav doubled down, thinking the market had further to go. His new broker was starting to get nervous. By now, most traders believed the recovery was over. And to make things worse, Nav was close to his margin limit and hadn't put a stop loss on as the US market closed. Fearing the worst, the next morning his broker called Nav. His mother answered the phone. After his mother woke him up, Nav told the broker to look at the charts and hung up. Later that day, the Fed announced $8 billion to ease the flow of liquidity in the market. The markets exploded, but instead of cashing out, he held. While enjoying a meal at McDonald's, the markets continued to rally. Nav made $50 million off this single trade. He was ready to put his new plan into action. Rebellion against the Matrix. On Friday, June 12, 2009, Nav emailed his broker to put him in touch with a trading technology expert. He followed up with an email titled Matrix, in which he described his exact requests. On-screen display, cancel if close function, alternate the closeness, one or more prices away, join bid/offer, you hit into orders but don't get filled, being able to enter the orders on multiple prices using one click, the abilities for my orders to rest on a particular side. If not enough volume underneath, it will pull while staying at the back of the book. This can be done by increasing/decreasing my order by one lot every time a new order is detected to be able to enter an integer. Lastly, the abilities for my orders to only allow one clip to go into them. Hence, if I'm working on a 500 lot and a 2-lot trades, the 480 balance is removed immediately. Nav was up against an opponent much stronger and with way more capital than himself. He knew he could never build the software that could compete with the algos, but he had a better idea. The quants were followers, reacting in predictable ways. If he could mess with the robot signal, he didn't have to beat their speed. Instead, he could take back some control. The goal was simple: to distort the number of supply and demand enough to alter the algo's functionality, which would allow him to buy low and sell high. While placing fake orders in the back of the queue worked, it was hard to make a significant impact. Nav knew if he wanted to mess up the algos, he had to get closer to the best offer. If the orders filled, it would cost him millions. So he decided he needed to change his order every time someone would change their order, ensuring he always stayed at the back of the book. +1, -1 deviations, alternating to maintain his position size. To get it done, he partnered up with an engineer in New York, Antonio Hedrugales. The engineer touched down in London, and after a few meetings, was able to get the cancel of close option to work. But the back of the book functionality was proving to be more difficult. See, most high-frequency trading firms want to be as quick as possible. This was the opposite, so he said he would look into it. A couple months passed and he didn't hear anything from the engineer. In November, Nav followed up, saying what he made was already proving to be very useful. With a few close friends, and besides the occasional soccer game, Nav stayed inside for most of his day. Nocturnal, trading out a small bedroom in his parents' house. It's a wild idea to build a money printing machine and not tell anybody about it. The previous day, he made $435,000. That's more than his parents' house. Early in his career, he decided to not talk to his friends or parents about his finances. He worried they would treat him differently. A few weeks earlier, on March 23rd, an in-house member of the CME had picked up on his suspicious activity. Other traders that reported Nav's orders kept disappearing. He received a warning to stop. Nav replied, "Oh, sorry, I was just showing a friend of mine what high-frequency trading firms do on the bid side of the market almost 24 hours a day. Does this mean you're cracking down on them as well?" He continued using the program the next day. It was election day. Residents made their way to polling station. Britain was in a turmoil after the financial crisis. Unemployment was up 50%. Banks like RBS and Lloyd's were in hot waters, and the economy on life support. All the uncertainty flowed into the market, which was good for trading. Between mid-2009 and April 2010, the global stock market bounced back from its lows. But the crisis had just exposed the EU pigs as they battled with their debts. The biggest was Greece. The country was pretty much bankrupt. On May 2nd, the EU Central Bank decided on a $1,455 billion lifeline. On May 4th, thousands of people started protesting. With panic emerging in the EU, large financial players started withdrawing their EU assets and diversifying into gold and fine metals. On May 6th, at 3:20 p.m., NAV turned his setup on. He activated the cancel if closed feature and placed 4 sell orders totaling 2,100 contracts, starting 3 levels above the best offer, $1,163. They had a combined value of over $120 million. In the next 6 minutes, these orders were automatically closed and reopened 604 times. At 5:17 p.m., NAV activated the auto trader for the last time. Usually, he used it for 5 to 10 minutes. This time, he left it on for 2 hours and cracked up the size. He had 6 sell orders totaling his value to $200 million. In the final 2 hours alone, he traded a combined value of $3.4 billion, and he made a profit of $879,000. 1 minute after shutting off his trading program, the E-mini started to plummet with a velocity and intensity never seen before. It shed 5% of its value in 4 minutes. It looked like a steep cliff. The S&P 500 and its individual shares started falling. It was unbelievable. More panic emerged. At 1:45, the trading had paused, and the markets had fallen so deep that the automatic pause system had kicked in, and for 5 long minutes, trading froze. After the pause, markets climbed back at record rates, way faster than humanly possible.
Panic selling on the way down, and all of a sudden it just stopped on a dime. All of a sudden here, we started hearing screams.
Nerds Gummy Clusters. Unleash your senses.
Welcome to a new edition of Capital Ideas Podcast. We're going to hear about successes, failures, ideas, and some great stories from decades of stock and bond investment experience. Invest 30 minutes in an episode today.
Buy, buy, buy.
Governments and lawmakers got to work to uncover what happened. If you read the Wall Street headlines, it was the quant trading firms, a glitch that wiped trillions in value. By summer 2012, Nav had finally managed to improve his algo further to the point of all his desired features. He found himself a new broker, R.J. O'Brien, since his last one had gone bankrupt. Over the years, Mr. Jesus had continued sending Nav updates of his money and had even set up offshore accounts for him. They also presented him numerous business investment opportunities, like new up-and-coming gaming companies in which he could invest. While he continued trading, the regulators were on his trail. They deducted from a recreation of the flash crash that there was a high-ticket player spoofing large volume sizes at MFM trading. On April 21st, 2015, in a joint operation between US and UK police forces, they arrested Nav. His life started collapsing. The tax pressures, the managing of business investments, and the offshore accounts. It had all become too complicated. It wasn't trading anymore. In prison, Nav's autistic character suffered. He struggled to maintain his mental health. When his new cellmate tried to hang himself, as Nav screamed for guards while holding up his legs, Nav broke. As his lawyers struggled to get $5 million in bail from his offshore accounts, they realized Nav was in deep trouble. His business partner, Jesus, wasn't a genius money manager at all. He had been running a pyramid scheme, paying old investors their insane returns using new investor money. Because the entire pyramid scheme was offshore, it was impossible to get his money back. Nav had lost everything. Before sentence, Nav asked to say a few final words. I spent 36 years trying to find happiness on a path built on a lie. I did things society said will give you happiness, and when they didn't, I didn't know where to look. Eric Aldrich put out a paper analysis on the flash crash and the S&P 500 E-mini trading data millisecond by millisecond. From his paper, he concluded that Nav at most had impacted the fall by 0.324 basis points. The free Nav became a popular tag for day traders on Twitter. It became clear that Nav had become somewhat of a scapegoat, taking the fall for much larger quant firms who also played an undeniable role in the flash crash. Amongst day traders to this day, many view Nav as a legendary trader who started with nothing and became one of the biggest traders on the markets, all in the comfort of his own bedroom. Thank you guys for watching, and tune in next time for another day trading legend.
There was a time when anyone would tremble upon hearing the name John D. Rockefeller. Not only was he the world's first billionaire, he's one of the richest people in history. His empire, Standard Oil, became the most dominant monopoly in the world by brutally crushing competitors, taking control of multiple industries, bribing the government into submission, and treating business as if it was war. Because of his ruthless business practices and secretive deals, Rockefeller made many enemies. His career is filled with bitter rivalries, like with Andrew Carnegie, and even ferocious battles against US presidents. But before he was the titan of the oil industry, Rockefeller was at the very bottom of society. His story is one of only a handful of cases where someone manages to rise from the depth of poverty to the absolute peak of wealth and power. Rockefeller's story is at times inspiring, and at times chilling. It's an example of what happens when greed and ambition go completely unchecked. So, let me take you back to 1839, where a young John D. Rockefeller is born into poverty. In 1839, John D. Rockefeller was the first child born into a family of peasant farmers with no cash to spare. In his small town of less than 1,000, the most mysterious character to be found was undoubtedly John's father, who was known as Devil Bill. Instead of helping on the family farm, Bill did just about anything else. He was an athlete, ventriloquist, hunter, hypnotist, and even an animal trainer. Once he won a bear in a competition, kept it as a pet, and taught it to do tricks. Bill did a little of this, a little of that, but not much of anything. Bill would also spontaneously skip town in the middle of the night, leaving John and his siblings to fend for themselves for weeks or even months, only to reappear in a luxurious carriage and shower John and his siblings with toys and gifts. And this confused John, because his family lived in a crumbling old house, wore tattered clothes, and they were hungry and cold every night. They lived a pitiful life, with these occasional bouts of luxury when his father returned. And the reason for that was because Bill lived a secret double life as a con artist. Whenever he disappeared, Bill changed his name from William Rockefeller to Dr. William Livingston, and traveled from town to town selling useless herbal remedies and potions to the sick and desperate. Because Bill was usually far away running scams, John's mother enlisted John's help working at the farm, where she instilled a strong religious faith and sense of duty in him whilst they ploughed the fields. For a boy younger than 10, balancing school and farming was backbreaking, but it taught him the value of discipline and hard work. John was proud to be helping his family out. In fact, he even started coming up with other ways to make money. For example, John once followed a wild turkey into the woods, stole its eggs, and raised the hatchlings. When they matured into turkeys, John sold some of them for a tidy profit, and kept the rest so he could get more eggs and repeat the process. Despite his young age, John was now pitching in a few dollars every week and was making a serious impact on the family's finances. It looked like the Rockefellers might finally have a decent and stable life. However, when John was 10, his father Bill was accused of sexually assaulting a young woman. Even though nothing was proven, the Rockefellers still faced public disgrace, and so they were forced to pack their bags and find a new home. You'd think after this event, Bill would dial back his schemes, his infidelity, and focus on healing his relationships to his family. But instead, he did the complete opposite.
Stop loss on Kraken, it's like a soccer match. When you are 1-0 ahead, you park the bus. That's your stop loss. To make sure you don't risk it all.
Let us do the heavy lifting with Walmart grocery delivery.
Whilst using his fake identity of Dr. William Livingston, Bill married another woman in a different state where no one recognized him. Of course, he kept this a secret, and neither John's mother nor the other woman ever knew he had 2 wives. But the effect was evident. Bill was almost never around. So the Rockefellers moved from town to town, and John took on more responsibility as the unofficial head of the household. All whilst going to school, he kept finding ways to make money, manage the family's finances, and he even started giving out very small loans. Finally, the Rockefellers found a good home in Cleveland, Ohio, but now that John was 16 and nearly done with school, he wondered what the next phase of his life would be. John wanted to go to college, but by this point he had 4 siblings and a 5th on the way. And since John's father was absent even more than normal now that he had his secret other wife, John's mother relied on John to help pay for their food, housing, and education. This meant college was out of the question. John had to get to work immediately. And so, just 2 months before his graduation, John dropped out of school and began looking for a job in Cleveland. He was after something big, so he made a list of all the biggest railroads, banks, and wholesale merchants in the city. However, every time John showed up to an interview, people laughed in his face when they found out he was only 16 years old. John faced rejection after rejection, but no amount of humiliation was going to stop him, and after 6 long weeks, he got an interview at a small firm that needed help with bookkeeping. When they saw John's excellent penmanship, they decided to give him a chance and told him to get to work immediately, not even mentioning how much he'd get paid. John was ecstatic, and for the rest of his life, he celebrated September 26th as a personal holiday he called Job Day. To him, it was even more important than his own birthday. Even though it was not a massive operation, John's first job taught him how to deal with suppliers, pay bills, and see the inner workings of a real business for the first time. One day, his boss came in with a check for $4,000 and put it inside a safe. John knew the safe's combination, so when his boss was gone, he opened it up just so he could hold the note in his hands, hypnotized by how much it represented. John dreamed of someday making as much money as his bosses, and so every morning before heading off to work, he began repeating to himself, "I am bound to be rich." On the last day of 1855, John's bosses gave him his payment. $50, which meant he'd only earned a little over 50 cents a day. It wasn't much, but since he'd done such a good job, his bosses raised his salary to $300 per year, the equivalent of around $11,000 today. The raise gave John something he deeply wanted, independence from his father. Now, with his mother's help, he could finally give his family the stable life they yearned for. And from early on in his career, John personally gave around 10% of his salary to various charitable causes. But after 2 years of diligent work, a recession slowed the business down, and one of the founders quit the firm. All of his responsibilities fell onto John, who became the company's lead accountant. However, John knew the economic downturn had caused a sharp decline in the firm's revenues, and he suspected that soon the firm may have to close down completely. And yet, John wasn't worried. His 2 years of experience in the job had given him a huge amount of confidence, and so John was already planning his biggest move yet. John D. Rockefeller was ready to start his own company. During his first job, John had become friends with Maurice Clark, a 28-year-old chemist who worked down the street from him. Even though John was just 18 years old at this point, he'd developed a good reputation as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, and one day Maurice told him he was planning on starting a produce business, and suggested that they partner up together. After saving up a bit of money, they formed Clark and Rockefeller, and got to work buying and reselling grain, fish, beans, meat, and other foods. It was tough at first. John and Maurice were often exhausted from looking for customers out on the road, but owning their own business gave them immense pride. And even though he was a bit shy and quiet at first, John was a capable salesman. Because he was so mature, everyone called him Mr. Rockefeller. The older men in the industry easily trusted him, and the list of clients at Clark and Rockefeller quickly grew. In fact, their biggest problem was that they didn't have the capital needed to scale the business and handle even more clients. But John and Maurice found a smart way to solve this problem. If they wanted to seek a $5,000 loan, they would go around Cleveland saying their firm was looking to invest $10,000, very publicly giving the impression that they had plenty of cash. This simple trick meant the banks were more willing to give them money. And the extra loans they got put them in a great position when the American Civil War broke out, as business picked up even more. As a devout Baptist, John was very strongly opposed to slavery, so he wanted the Union to win the war. However, John was still responsible for feeding his family of 6, and if he stopped working, they wouldn't have any income. So instead of serving in the army himself, John paid $300 for a substitute and even paid to equip several more Union soldiers. The war gave a huge boost to the economy of the northern states, and Cleveland became an important strategic location for the Union. Local food prices were massively inflated, so John's produce business quadrupled almost overnight. In 1862, John and Maurice cleared a profit of $17,000, over $500,000 in today's money. Not bad for a 23-year-old, but an opportunity to multiply his wealth even more soon came across John's desk. You see, before electricity, people used to light their homes at night by burning oil inside of a lamp. Usually this oil came from whale fat, but finding and hunting down whales was costly and difficult, and sadly, some whales had been hunted down to the point of extinction. However, in 1859, someone in Pennsylvania discovered that by using a tall wooden structure known as an oil derrick, you could extract industrial amounts of crude oil by drilling straight into the ground. Mining crude oil this way was cheap, and it was fairly easy. Profits came quickly, and since so many people were made rich by the oil boom, crude oil was given the nickname Black Gold. And that's when John was introduced to Samuel Andrews, a young man who was looking for investors to build a crude oil refinery in Cleveland, which was only a day's ride away from the Pennsylvania oil regions.
New Olympic Organic Kids Drinkable Yogurt, made with milk from grass-fed cows.
What if we reimagined light as a force for change? We transform sunlight into street light, spotlights into highlights, and make every light the light that powers your life.
Andrews had a huge advantage over most of the competition. He discovered that if you applied sulfuric acid to crude oil, it would essentially purify it and turn it into kerosene. When burned, kerosene lasted longer and shined brighter than crude oil. It was a simple process, but the secret was closely guarded by the few who had discovered it. Now that John and Maurice had plenty of money to spare because of how successful their produce business was, they thought it would be wise to diversify their business, and thus they loaned Andrews $4,000 to set up his oil refinery. But to begin, they considered this as a side venture. John and Maurice kept managing their produce business and let Andrews handle the refinery by himself. Setting it up was remarkably simple, and because kerosene was a superior product to crude oil, it began selling like crazy. John couldn't ignore the numbers anymore. Within only a year, the oil refinery had become the most profitable side of the business. Together, John and Maurice decided to make a bold move. They abandoned their previous business and went all in on the oil industry. However, their initial enthusiasm was met by a massive challenge. The supply of oil was always in an unpredictable state. At this point, oil had only been found in one small region of Pennsylvania, so many people thought that it would eventually run out. Whenever someone struck a massive oil field, an entire town of oil miners would suddenly form around the site, drill every last drop, and then the town would disappear just as quickly as it had formed. Because of this, there were periods where oil was overabundant and prices would dip as low as 10 cents. But on the flip side, if it seemed like the oil was running out, then prices would suddenly rise all the way up to $14. So, to say that the oil market was turbulent would be an understatement. To mitigate this effect slightly, John decided to stay out of mining oil and concentrate only on refining oil. But for John and Maurice, the situation was still extremely stressful. When oil was easy to find, they weren't as profitable as prices were low. And when the wells were running dry, they feared that the last drop had finally been found and they'd soon have nothing to sell. The uncertainty was too much to handle for Maurice, and in 1865, he agreed to sell his share of the business to John. This was the tipping point of his career. Scared to his bones, but with a calm exterior, John agreed to buy Maurice's share of the company for $72,500, or $1.35 million in today's money. Maurice was cashing out, whilst John was doubling down and going all in on the seemingly risky oil business. However, it seemed like John's daily affirmation that he was bound to be rich was quickly becoming a reality, because just as the deal was going down, a gigantic new oil field was found in the Pennsylvania oil regions, finally undoing any doubts he had about oil running out. Of course, the market was still very competitive, so if John truly wanted to become as wealthy as he desired, he would have to brutally crush his competition. The year before buying his business partner's share of the company, John married a woman who shared his religious devotion. Even though he was now making good money, John bought a modest house in Cleveland where they began to raise a family. So with his home life in order and the northern economy booming after the Union Army won the Civil War, everything was ready for John to begin building his empire. Now that his partner was gone, John rebranded the company under a new name, Standard Oil, and he got to work building a second refinery and began exporting kerosene to Europe. John was confident that the oil industry would make him extremely rich, but it quickly became apparent that he needed some help. So John took on a new partner to help him run the company, a man named Henry Flagler, and the two men were remarkably similar. Like John, Henry wasn't interested in making a little money. He wanted to build an empire. That's why when John told him about his ambitious plans for Standard Oil, Henry was all in. He was also just as religious, disciplined, and determined as John. In fact, perhaps their only difference was that Henry was even more ruthless when it came to doing business. Henry approached business the same way he would approach war. The only way to win was to completely crush your enemy, and so John adopted this philosophy as well. You see, competition in the oil refining industry was quickly turning warlike. Now that others had uncovered how simple the refining process really was, Rockefeller's product was no longer unique. New brands of kerosene were popping up all over the market. So John and Henry began scheming and decided to form strategic alliances that would not only boost Standard Oil's profits, but also hurt their competitors at the same time. One example of this was when John secretly colluded with the railroads to get better transportation costs than all their competitors. At the time, oil was transported from one place to the other by an extensive network of trains, mostly dominated by three railroad companies: the New York Central, the Erie, and the most powerful company in America at the time, the Pennsylvania Railroad. Because of the way their routes were laid out, it was beneficial for the New York Central and the Erie railroads to carry oil to refineries in Cleveland. But for the Pennsylvania Railroad, it was more profitable to carry oil directly to New York City or Philadelphia. So the Pennsylvania Railroad declared that Cleveland would be wiped out as a refining center, and they pulled out of the city completely. After this news that the largest railroad was leaving the city, many refineries in Cleveland left the city too. This was a disaster for the New York Central and Erie railroads, who had made sizable investments in Cleveland, and they were now losing customers. So instead of joining the panicking crowd and leaving Cleveland, John saw that the Erie and New York Central railroads were in dire need for business, and he decided to use their desperation to his advantage. In exchange for a consistent flow of oil through their networks, John negotiated a deal with the Erie in which Standard Oil would get a 75% discount on the railroad's official shipping costs. And in exchange for a daily order of 60 carloads of refined oil, John negotiated another deal with the New York Central Railroad to pay $1.65 per barrel shipped, when the official rate was $2.40. So, with both railroads, John now had extremely favorable rates secured. And even though the railroads were reluctant to accept these lower prices, the guaranteed consistent shipments were irresistible to them. In fact, since these railroads went from shipping all sorts of things to focusing just on oil, they could simplify their operations and boost their profits. So it was win-win for everyone. Well, except for the Pennsylvania Railroad and Standard Oil's competitors. Because of the deal, Cleveland became the largest refining center in the country, and since the Pennsylvania Railroad had abandoned the city, it was at a steep disadvantage when trying to revive their business there. And of course, the discounts John had negotiated with the railways, known as railroad rebates, were kept a secret to Standard Oil's competitors. And so all the other oil businesses would have to pay the full price to transport their oil on the very same trains. And here's the thing, because John knew for a fact that his costs were now lower than all his competitors, he was able to trigger a price war. John would lower the price of his oil so that his competitors would have to do the same in order to remain competitive in the market. But since John knew his competitors were paying more than him to transport the oil and thus had higher costs, even if they charged the same price for their oil, John was still making more profit. He knew his competitors wouldn't be able to survive. So John kept slashing the prices, and eventually the price would go so low that some competitors would go bankrupt. Once they went bust, Standard Oil would have way less competition, so John could bump up the price again and charge even more than he did originally. It was brutal, but it was extremely effective. Now, John knew these railroad rebates were morally dubious. They gave bigger businesses hugely preferential treatment over smaller ones. However, it would be over a decade before any antitrust laws were passed to prevent these kind of monopolistic practices. So legally, John wasn't doing anything wrong. And thus, in the meantime, this warlike strategy to crush competitors was paying off, and Standard Oil raked in enormous profits. However, there was one major problem. The massive surplus of oil meant oil prices had fallen as low as $2.40 per barrel, and as more oil fields were found in Pennsylvania, it seemed that the price would continue to fall. The remaining competition was barely hanging on. In fact, John estimated that around 90% of oil refiners were actually losing money. But John began to fear that his individual success could be overshadowed by a total collapse of the entire oil industry. John was convinced that if they were facing a system-wide problem, they needed to find a system-wide solution for it. And John's solution would be to organize an even more dominant monopoly, the likes of which had never been seen before. By 1872, John and Henry were ruthlessly expanding Standard Oil, but oil prices had dropped another 25%. They knew if they didn't do something soon, the entire industry could collapse and they would fall right along with it. So John decided to collaborate with the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, Tom Scott. John and Scott had been rivals after the deal John made with the other two main railroads, but now Scott was reaching out to make a similar secret deal that was even more ambitious and ruthless. Scott proposed a secret alliance between the largest railroads and a very select group of the largest refiners, which of course included Rockefeller. And thus, Standard Oil and the Pennsylvania, New York Central, and Erie railroads all formed an alliance together under the inconspicuous name of the South Improvement Company, or SIC for short. The deal was that in exchange for a secret 50% rebate on transportation costs, John would transport all his oil exclusively through these railroads. But John wasn't content with just getting benefits for himself. He designed the deal to be devastating for his competition. For example, when anyone outside of this secret alliance transported kerosene through these railroads, Standard Oil would receive a 50% rebate from the cost of their shipments as well. These were known as drawbacks, and they meant that Standard Oil's competitors would not only be paying higher prices to transport their oil on the same railroads, but some of that money would be going directly to Rockefeller. And to top it all off, the railroads would even secretly give John detailed information about their competitors' shipments. He would know every detail of his rivals' businesses, and so he could undercut them by selling kerosene for cheaper prices. Anyone outside this secret alliance stood no chance. It was a death sentence for anyone excluded from the club, and the worst of it was, they didn't even know it. However, whilst many of Rockefeller's critics call this whole arrangement a shameless power grab, to John, he truly believed it was the best way to save the oil industry. Because as things stood with so many competitors, their product was getting closer and closer to being given away for free, as there was so much supply of oil readily available. He believed wiping out these smaller refiners would help the oil industry overall. But either way, it didn't matter, because rumors of a railroad and refiner cartel soon began to spread. When people read in the newspapers that the rates for the three most important railroads in the country had doubled overnight, they knew exactly who to blame: Tom Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad and John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil. As rumors of the alliance continued to spread, thousands of people took to the streets to protest, threatening Standard Oil and the Pennsylvania Railroad with violence, vandalism, and arson. Protesters hijacked Standard shipments and spilled their oil, and they tore the Pennsylvania's train tracks from the ground. But the final blow to the SIC came when the oil miners made their countermove and boycotted the SIC. Without a supply of crude oil, John's refineries were useless, so 2 months after it was formed, the SIC had been disbanded. It was a humiliating event, one that brought a lot of negative attention on John. But John wasn't fazed by it. He simply decided if he couldn't control the oil industry through shady backroom deals, then he would do it in public and conquer the industry by force. John wanted to bring as many refineries under Standard Oil as he could, and to his surprise, the SIC fiasco had actually caused one important change in the industry. Despite the very public fallout of the SIC alliance, there were still whispers of a secret railroad and refiner cartel, with many people paranoid that there must still be some kind of secret deal in place between the big railroads and the big refiners. Even though there wasn't, the rumors spread everywhere. Oil refiners were scared that if Standard Oil still had a secret deal with the railroads, they would get crushed, and John decided to leverage this threat to his advantage. In a period of 6 weeks, now known as the Cleveland Massacre, John managed to intimidate 22 out of the 26 oil refining companies in Cleveland into selling out for fractions of what their businesses were actually worth. So even though the SIC hadn't gone ahead, the fear it had created pressured many refiners into panic selling their companies to John. Plus, since many other refiners were losing money anyway, John would show them his company's finances so they could see how well Standard was doing, and to prove to them that he could outlast them all. For most refiners, the choice between fighting a losing battle and cashing out was obvious. And whenever anyone sold out, John gave them only two options. They could either sign a damning contract prohibiting them from ever joining the industry again, or they could join Standard Oil. Since most competitors chose to join Standard, John had the brightest minds in the industry working for him. All those entrepreneurs who'd been running their own companies were now brought under the Standard Oil umbrella into one giant company. Also, when the new refineries came under Standard's ownership, they outfitted them with the latest oil refining technology, which drastically cut costs. By mid-1873, John was in control of an empire with a growing number of highly efficient refineries that together could ship out over 1 million barrels of kerosene every year. He now had a monopoly over the Cleveland refineries. However, on September 18, 1873, a day historians call Black Thursday, a series of bank failures plunged the US economy into a national recession that lasted 6 years.
Old El Paso, where there ain't nothing weak about weeknights. Go on, get yourself some Old El Paso.
For the first time, oil prices dropped not because there was too much supply, but instead because of a total lack of demand. Standard began operating only 2 of their 6 main refining plants in Cleveland. And a year after Black Thursday, a single oil barrel traded for as little as 48 cents, less than the cost of an equal amount of water. So everyone from the miners to the railroads and the refiners were dreading their seemingly inevitable fate, bankruptcy. But thanks to Standard Oil's careful management of finances, excellent credit with banks, and their modernized refineries, John was one of the only refiners in the country who was able to still clear a profit. And as always, John regarded every crisis as an opportunity. He smelled blood in the water. Now, John already dominated in Cleveland at this point, which was one of the main refining centers in the country. But he knew the bleak economic conditions were a nationwide problem, and so refiners in the other refining centers like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York were all struggling badly. And thus, John decided this was precisely the right time to acquire as many of them as he could. So John initiated a nationwide buyout campaign, and whenever anyone was reluctant to sell out, John would resort to indirect ways of pressuring them into submission. For example, he would buy all the available refining machinery and barrels, so competitors couldn't even make or package their oil. And if somehow they managed to make any oil, he would reserve every railroad for months, so they couldn't even ship it anywhere. Another one of John's brutal business tactics was to pressure the railroads to raise prices for other refiners high enough that they would soon face bankruptcy. Since he had detailed records of all his competitors' shipments, he would wait for them to be on the verge of ruin, and then he would offer to save their business by buying them up for pennies. Eventually, everyone who Standard Oil wanted to acquire was either absorbed into the growing giants or crushed under its pressure. By the time the economy was starting to recover, Standard controlled over half of Pittsburgh's refining capacity, the largest refineries in Philadelphia, and they secured a dominant position in New York as well. To exert even more control over the industry, John built a network of pipelines which brought crude oil into their refineries and pumped out refined oil in large cities. The pipelines meant Standard relied less on the railroads to transport their oil, and thus it further reduced their unit costs. And with its pipelines covering the eastern seaboard of the United States like tentacles, Standard Oil earned its appropriate nickname, the Octopus. Despite still only being in his 30s, John D. Rockefeller was now the undisputed king of oil refining, and one of the wealthiest men in the country. However, by now, too many people had been victims of Standard Oil's predatory business practices. The largest newspaper in America at the time even called the company the most cruel, impudent, pitiless and grasping monopoly that ever fastened upon a country. John's list of enemies was growing dangerously long. For the railroad companies, the oil industry was a tremendous source of business, as miners needed to get oil from wells to refineries, and refiners then needed to get it to the big cities. However, when Standard Oil began laying a vast network of pipelines all across America's eastern shore, the railroad companies were faced with the fact that one of their most important customers was making them obsolete. So Tom Scott, the owner of the Pennsylvania Railroad, decided to lay his own pipelines. But he also did something he knew John wouldn't like. He started building his own oil refineries. Now, Scott was in direct competition with John, so John interpreted this as declaration of war. He decided to launch an all-out attack against America's most powerful company. First, John cancelled all his business with the Pennsylvania Railroad and redirected all that oil to other railroads instead. Then, John lowered the price of Standard Oil kerosene, which meant that competitors had to do the same, thus reducing their profit margins and decreasing the shipment orders on the Pennsylvania Railroad. And finally, John convinced the New York Central and Erie railroads to lower their shipping fees drastically for everyone to make sure the Pennsylvania Railroad lost even more business. And these strategies most definitely worked. To compete with all this, the Pennsylvania Railroad literally had to pay refiners to transport oil for them. Scott also had to lay off hundreds of his employees and reduce the salaries of those who stayed by 20%. But John's attack didn't just affect the Pennsylvania Railroad. Another big railroad, the B&O, had to make similar layoffs and wage cuts, and thus John's attack on the Pennsylvania Railroad inadvertently caused one of the most violent labor strikes in American history. Dozens of people died in the commotion, and in Pittsburgh alone, the Pennsylvania Railroad lost 500 freight cars, 120 locomotives, and 27 buildings after they were torched by protesters. Even John started to get concerned by the chaos that was unfolding. Before long, the Pennsylvania Railroad, a Goliath once thought to be invincible, had lost the battle against Standard Oil, and Tom Scott was more than ready to surrender. Scott was in a desperate position, and John's business partner Henry, who saw business as war, saw this as an opportunity to crush him totally. But John had a better idea, and instead moved to coordinate a massive deal with the railroads. John agreed to help the Pennsylvania Railroad survive by guaranteeing 47% of Standard's traffic to them. The New York Central, the Erie, and the B&O got the rest of it. In exchange for the steady source of shipments, John demanded a very large secret rebate on the Pennsylvania's official rates, he demanded even more detailed information about their competitors' shipments, and he wanted 20 cents for every single barrel that passed through any of the railroads as well. A lot of this was similar to the secret alliance that had been proposed before, but this time John was the one who held the balance of power and could basically demand what he wanted. The railroads had little choice. And thus, the deal effectively made John one of the most powerful men in America. John basically now owned the railroads, he essentially controlled the oil industry, and had an all-seeing eye into every one of his competitors. He completely dominated Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, and there were only a few scattered refineries in New York that weren't his. Standard Oil was now in control of about 90% of the entire oil refining industry. However, as for John's rival, Tom Scott, even though John had technically now struck up a deal with his company, the Pennsylvania Railroad never regained its footing, and Scott personally never recovered from his humiliating defeats. Just a year later, Scott suffered from a stroke and died shortly after. What's interesting here is that many years earlier, Tom Scott had been the mentor to a young Andrew Carnegie, who was to the steel industry what John was to the oil industry. Carnegie blamed the death of his beloved mentor on John, and thus rivalry was born between Carnegie and Rockefeller, the king of oil versus the king of steel. The rivalry between these two titans of industry would intensify as time went on, but for now, both men were determined to become wealthier than the other. In the midst of all this, John was becoming quite a notorious public figure. The fight with the Pennsylvania Railroad, his rivalry with Carnegie, and his tremendous wealth and power had all taken John from a mysterious oil man in Cleveland, Ohio, to now one of the most controversial figures in American newspapers. And yet, for all his wealth, fame, and power, John didn't indulge in the extravagant lifestyle that many of his peers did. When he moved to New York, John spent his free time playing with his children instead of seeking the company of wealthy bankers or celebrities, and he rarely bought expensive clothes or luxuries. Silently managing his army of puppets from their new office in New York, John was enriched by his 90% dominance of the oil refining industry. It seemed like he could now just sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. But actually, the opposite was true. Even though he had achieved total dominance, the state of the industry was changing, and fast. A few years earlier, Thomas Edison patented a light bulb that gave off a powerful white light for 100 hours, and he was pushing to light the country with electricity instead of oil. Then in 1885, a huge deposit of crude oil was found in northern Ohio. These two events meant many Standard Oil executives started to panic, fearing a massive oil surplus that would take the industry back to the days when oil was priced at 10 cents per barrel. But whilst his company was panicking, John was calm as ever. By now, he was a master at turning chaotic situations into opportunities, and this was exactly the crisis he'd been waiting for. But
new Olympic Organic Kids Drinkable Yogurt. 50% less sugar than the leading drinkable yogurt.
Trix is like Cookie in disguise.
Imagine one of our gang was in disguise.
Delicious.
Before we get to that, let's talk about an opportunity for you. Because it's been said that attention is the new oil. The people who understand how to get their message across and build an audience are the ones currently dominating in business. And that's where today's sponsor, School, can help you. School is a platform where you can create your own community or discover new ones. And having your own community means that you'll have a group of members who are naturally paying attention to your message as they engage each day. On School, you can create your own community within minutes and customize it how you want. Your members can join for free or by paying for membership. And you can share access to courses, events, bring people together, and keep your members highly engaged using School's built-in leaderboards and gamification. So if you want a place to connect with your audience, School is perfect for this. And if you're wanting to check out a new community to find people like you, you can easily do this too. School is the ideal way to discover communities or create your own. Just click the link in the description below to check it out for yourself. Up until this point, Standard Oil had only focused on refining oil. John had been pursuing horizontal integration, taking over other refining companies who did the same thing he did. But John knew that the discovery of oil in Ohio would change the oil industry, and he wanted to ensure his company profited from Ohio's new oil fields. So this was just the excuse he needed to begin radical plans for vertical integration, where Standard Oil would now be involved in every step of the supply chain. John essentially wanted to cut out any middlemen and control the entire oil industry himself, from oil wells to refineries to transportation, storage, and distribution. And thus, John doubled down on every step of the business, turning Standard into its own supplier, transporter, producer, and retailer. Standard Oil's existing operation had the strong base of industrial infrastructure it needed to make sure it kept making money, whilst John figured out how to profit from Ohio's new oil fields. He began buying up land in the area, building hundreds of derricks to drill for oil, and laying new pipelines to transport it. However, it quickly became clear that Ohio's oil had one glaring problem. Even after it was refined, it had such a terrible smell that people called it skunk oil, and so nobody wanted to buy it, and it traded for as low as 15 cents per barrel. Almost everyone else gave up trying to sell the skunk oil immediately, but instead, John hired a team of chemists to study the skunk oil, and within a year, they'd found a way to remove the sulfur in the oil which had been causing the terrible smell. Standard was now the only company selling this new, cheaper form of oil, and this gave John a massive head start when a few years later, oil began breaking out in immense quantities in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and California. It was now evident that America was sitting on an ocean of petroleum, and the company best poised to take complete advantage of it was Standard Oil. It was also around this time that automobiles were beginning to replace the horse and carriage, and luckily for John, the process of refining crude oil produces one key waste product, gasoline. With wealthy consumers being introduced to the automobile, Standard found a reason to transform a material they typically discarded into an immediate source of extra profits. This meant that even when the United States was thrust into another economic depression in 1893 and 600 banks had to close their doors, John was once again prospering amidst even the worst economic conditions. With John's fortune growing larger than ever, John took more of a backseat in day-to-day operations at Standard Oil and began to think more about investing elsewhere. For a man as capable in business as John, you'd expect he'd probably also be a decent investor. But if you took a look at John's personal investments at the time, you'd find most of them were deep in the red. John knew if he wanted to keep the generational wealth he'd acquired up to this point, that he needed to get his investments in order. So he hired a Baptist minister called Frederick Gates to help him. Now, it's impossible to know what John was thinking when he hired a former priest to administer his fortune. But years later, when John was asked who was the greatest businessman he'd ever met, he pointed to Frederick. And there's no doubt Frederick helped grow John's fortune much larger with a series of strategic investments. It was also around this time that John's son, John Jr., graduated from university, and John thought it would be a good idea to have Jr. learn from Frederick. Frederick taught Jr. how to invest, how to negotiate, and before long, the two of them had turned John's laughable portfolio into a wealth multiplication machine. It was at this point that John told them to start making huge investments in other industries, like buying up railroad companies, which would come in handy later. But the most critical of these investments was a long strip of land in Minnesota, known as the Mesabi Mountain Range. In this territory was a 120-mile-long vein of the highest quality iron ore found to date, potentially the largest in North America. Now, iron is the main ingredient needed to produce another important material, steel. So when Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King, heard this news, he feared that John was planning to compete against him in the steel business. And in fact, John had been planning to do this for a long time. Up until now, Rockefeller and Carnegie's rivalry had really only been about who was wealthier, but now they were in an open battle in Carnegie's territory. John was no longer content dominating the oil industry, he was now coming after the steel industry.
Let us do the heavy lifting with Walmart Grocery Delivery.
John told Frederick and Jr. to commence mining operations in the Mesabi Range, and they undercut Carnegie by selling their higher quality ore to his competitors at dirt cheap prices. As they built up their mining operation, a rumor started to spread that John was planning to further infiltrate Carnegie's niche and build a huge steel mill. Now, over on Carnegie's side, he had a head start of a few decades in the steel industry, which gave him considerable leverage over John, but he also had two big problems. Firstly, John had a source of iron that was more plentiful and of a higher quality than Carnegie's. And secondly, Carnegie had made the mistake of assuming that iron would always be cheap and easy to find, so he hadn't made any investments in iron mines during the last few years. His blind faith had been proven wrong over time, and now his supply of the most important mineral he needed was running out. And so, hoping to save his business, Carnegie approached John, Frederick and Jr. to make a deal. By the time the negotiations concluded, the two sides had reached an agreement. Carnegie agreed to buy a minimum of 600,000 tons of ore from John's mine every year and transport all of it, plus an additional 600,000 tons from his own mine, exclusively through John's railroads, which John now owned a few of. In exchange, Carnegie would get a secret rebate from John for supplying his railroad with so much business. It was the exact same sort of mutually beneficial secret agreement that John was used to making with railroad companies for his oil transportation, except now he was the one giving Carnegie a secret rebate. And to seal the deal, Carnegie agreed to never buy land around the Mesabi Range, and John agreed never to build a steel mill. The partnership was win-win for both men, and so it seemed they were willing to overlook their differences if it meant they'd both profit hugely, and of course at the same time, hurt both of their competitors. The agreement between these two former rivals soon made news headlines, provoking a craze on Wall Street. Investors hoped to get rich by investing in John's iron mines and Carnegie's steel mills, which both looked unstoppable now they were working together rather than competing. However, there was one man who had a bit more imagination than simply investing separately in their two companies, and that man was JP Morgan. JP Morgan realized that if he could unite John's investment with Carnegie's business under a single name, he could create a steel monopoly that was more profitable than Carnegie Steel and even larger than Standard Oil. JP Morgan called it US Steel, and if it all worked out, it could be the most valuable company in history. So JP Morgan approached John and asked him how much he would sell the Mesabi iron mines for. But to his surprise, John said that Morgan should talk with his 27-year-old son, John Jr. JP Morgan assumed he'd be dealing with a rookie. How much could this 27-year-old really know? But when JP Morgan met Jr. and bluntly asked him, "What's your price?" Jr. was not intimidated by Wall Street's wealthiest banker. He calmly responded, "Mr. Morgan, I think there must be some mistake. I did not come here to sell. I understood you wished to buy." Jr. insisted that JP Morgan had to set the price for the Mesabi territory, which meant Jr. had all the power in the negotiation. Morgan was so surprised that he had to step out of his office and rethink his strategy. Eventually, he made his offer. In exchange for total ownership of the Mesabi mines and the existing mining operation in it, JP Morgan offered a grand total of $88.5 million in US Steel stock, just over $3.1 billion today. Later on, Morgan bought Carnegie's entire steel business and incorporated it into US Steel, and it became the world's first billion-dollar corporation. But remember, John now owned a huge chunk of that company, and his US Steel stock soon appreciated to over $200 million. Plus, thanks to the automobile boom and the need for gasoline, Standard Oil was growing into an even more powerful monopoly than it had been before. Not to mention that thanks to Frederick, John's investments were now in order too. With all of this combined, John's wealth continued to grow to unimaginable levels. It was now spread across multiple industries, and John was finally ready to step back from the business world completely. However, John never publicly announced his retirement, which was a crucial mistake, as the public still closely associated him with Standard Oil, and that would soon come back to haunt him, as John was about to be involved in the most public scandal of his career. Even though he was now retired, John still owned around 30% of Standard Oil stock. And because of the tremendous growth of the auto industry, he was actually getting wealthier in retirement than when he was working. However, because of their brutal business practices, Standard now had such a negative public image that US President Theodore Roosevelt saw it as the perfect target to fight against in his rise to power. Now, this wasn't the first time he tried. Previously, Roosevelt passed a bill that punished railroad rebates, but it really wasn't enough to get the public excited, and the end of his first presidential term was coming up. So Roosevelt detected that the public opinion of John and Standard Oil was quickly turning from a mere dislike to a passionate hatred, and that was largely thanks to a journalist called Ida Tarbell. You see, Tarbell's father was one of the oil refiners who were bankrupted by John's ruthless business tactics a long time ago. Her father's business partner even took his own life after their wealth was destroyed by John. Now, Tarbell was publishing monthly articles that told an in-depth story about the company and the man who had bankrupted her father and made her childhood miserable. As you'd expect, she didn't have many nice things to say. Tarbell managed to break through John's wall of secrecy, and so the dark history of the once mysterious Standard Oil was now in full view, with John as its protagonist. His backroom deals with railroads, his intimidation tactics, the politicians they bribed, everything was fully revealed, and the American public devoured the story. The series even exposed John's father's history of scams, his sexual abuse accusation, and they eventually discovered his second marriage, which took a heavy emotional toll on John and his family. Needless to say, John never responded to anything Tarbell wrote, and so his public image was contaminated as she publicly condemned him. And his silence only angered the public further, so in a few years, John went from one of the most private and mysterious members of the American elite to the national embodiment of corruption and greed. Now, the public was dying to see John and Standard Oil pay for their crimes. So as President Roosevelt approached the end of his first presidential term, he saw an opportunity to use the public sentiment to his advantage by making Standard Oil his enemy. In his presidential campaign, Roosevelt promised to take down the monopolies, and thus when he won the re-election, it was time to make good on that promise and wage war on Rockefeller's empire. He launched a full-fledged investigation into Standard Oil, and now the anti-monopoly laws that corrupt politicians always ignored got used to their full potential. Roosevelt announced that the government would prosecute Standard with the full force of the United States government in a historic all-out attack. Standard was charged with monopolizing the oil industry, predatory pricing, negotiating railroad rebates, corporate espionage, and secret ownership of competitors. Apart from having to fight 21 lawsuits in individual states, the federal government hit Standard with the largest lawsuit in history up to that point. There were over 1,000 exhibits, 444 testifying witnesses, and over 12,000 pages of damning evidence that Standard Oil was, indeed, a monopoly. The lawsuit was so vast that it continued years beyond Roosevelt's presidency, but his ambition to defeat Standard Oil would eventually be satisfied. The evidence that Standard Oil was a full-fledged monopoly came when Standard's profits were examined. Because they were in control of 87% of oil refining in America, 100% in some places, Standard was taking full advantage of their monopoly status and overpricing their kerosene in order to make outrageous profits. And apart from being confirmed as a monopoly, evidence proved that Standard had systematically bribed hundreds of politicians and knowingly broken multiple antitrust laws. On May 15, 1911, after being found guilty of the crimes they'd been accused of, it was ordered by the federal government to dissolve Standard Oil and reorganize its subsidiaries into separate, unaffiliated companies. After 41 years, John's empire had finally been dealt a fatal blow and was being split up. Now, of course, you'd think breaking up an empire of Standard Oil's scale would be a losing situation for John. Many of his enemies, like Ida Tarbell and President Roosevelt, certainly thought this event was a cause for celebration. But what they didn't expect was that the dissolution of Standard Oil would be the most profitable event in John's career. You see, from the outside, it may have looked like Standard had been ruined by the dissolution, but actually, it was a pretty convenient time for the company to be broken up, as a lot of important changes were happening in the industry as a whole. As more oil fields were found in places like Texas and California, independent refiners were starting to find their footing in new markets faster than Standard could absorb them. The Middle East and Russia were now looking like their first worthy international competitors as well. And at the year before the verdict, gasoline had surpassed kerosene sales, and so the entire focus of the industry was changing. And because John still owned around a quarter of Standard Oil, when it was broken up into 34 different companies, he got his share of stock in all of them. And after they were open to public trading, investors nearly tripled the value of his shares. So John became even richer. By the end of 1911, the same year that Standard Oil was dissolved, John was getting close to becoming the world's first billionaire. Andrew Carnegie was now left far behind in the fight for the title of world's richest man. But now that John had achieved such unimaginable wealth, just one question remained. What was he gonna do with all that money? But before we get to the next chapter, if you sell anything online, you're gonna want to know about today's sponsor, ShipStation. ShipStation software makes e-commerce so much easier and saves you both time and money. Firstly, ShipStation integrates everywhere you sell online, including Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Shopify, and lots more. And it lets you manage all your orders in one simple dashboard. Secondly, ShipStation lets you easily automate shipping tasks. They have robust automations and reporting, which makes scaling your business so much easier. And thirdly, when you use ShipStation, you get access access to industry-leading shipping rates from USPS, UPS, DHL, and Global Post. And we're talking discounts of up to 84% off the normal price. Over 130,000 companies have grown their e-commerce businesses with ShipStation already. And if you use my link, you can literally get a free trial to test it out risk-free. It's really quick to get started, so set your business up for holiday season success with ShipStation. Go to shipstation.com/magnates today and sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's shipstation.com/magnates. John was the wealthiest man in the world, and now that he was retired and that his old company had been dissolved, he decided to dedicate the rest of his life to philanthropy. And even though he was over 70 years old at this point, John's sense of duty meant that he was as energetic about charity work as he was in business. Throughout his life, John told people that he was a soldier of God sent to earth and given money for the benefit of mankind. And John really did want to make an impact on the world. And to be fair, ever since John got his first paycheck, John had given various organizations at least 10% of the money he made. And even when his sizable donations were publicly labeled as just ways to improve his image, John continued to give away a lot of money anonymously as well. However, John wanted to make his philanthropy a well-oiled machine that continued his legacy. So in 1913, he started the Rockefeller Foundation with the two people who were previously responsible for managing his personal investments, Frederick Gates and his son John Jr. By now, John had given away almost $150 million, and in the future, he would personally give a grand total of $540 million. To add to that, Frederick and Jr. went on to give away $537 million more through the foundation, and Jr. personally gave away an additional $540 million of the wealth he inherited from his father. In its over 100-year history, the Rockefeller Foundation has given countless billions of dollars in total, and it's still making donations today. Calculating the total amount and adjusting it for inflation is complicated, but it's safe to say that the amount is well into the tens of billions, ranking John amongst the most generous philanthropists in history. The Rockefeller Foundation focused on two main issues in its inception: medicine and education, and it's undoubtedly made a meaningful contribution to society. On the side of medicine, John's donations to the laboratories and medical research facilities helped spur an era of scientific innovation that saved hundreds of thousands of lives from diseases like hookworm, malaria, and meningitis. On the side of education, John's money helped save the southern United States from abject poverty and built hundreds of schools all around the world, including two of the world's most prestigious research institutions. Today, the Rockefeller Foundation contributes even more to many other causes, and it all started with a 16-year-old who had to go into business to help feed his family. However, this of course all raises an interesting moral debate on what should we really think about Rockefeller. Clearly, John's legacy has two sides to it. As the author of his biography writes, what makes him so problematic is that his good side was every bit as good as his bad side was bad. It's almost as if there were two completely different John D. Rockefellers. There's undeniably a charitable and dutiful side to him, but there's also a corrupt, unforgiving, and brutal side. Both sides are true, but whatever you think of John D. Rockefeller, the fact remains that he's one of the most fascinating businessmen in history. Maybe that's why after John died at 97 years old, his son, who had the same name, said, "There was only ever one John D. Rockefeller." But if you think Rockefeller's story was controversial, wait until you see the scandals Andrew Carnegie was involved with. Just click the thumbnail on screen now, and I'll see you there in a second. Cheers. How does a boy born into poverty become the richest man in the world? Andrew Carnegie is the personification of the American dream, an extraordinary rise from the very bottom to the absolute top. However, I must warn you, there are two different sides to Andrew Carnegie. On the one hand, he was a hypocrite. He preached about workers' rights publicly, and yet privately he slashed his workers' wages, significantly increased their working hours, and essentially exploited his staff as slave labor in barbaric, dangerous conditions to build his fortune. He destroyed unions, and his actions resulted in countless unnecessary, brutal deaths. And yet, on the other hand, Andrew Carnegie may be the greatest ever philanthropist. After becoming the richest man in the world, he then spent the rest of his life giving almost all of that money away. He funded universities, schools, and nearly 3,000 free public libraries around the world to help others improve their own position in life. He's also responsible for incredible innovation that helped build America and change the way we do business. Carnegie's story is both inspiring and shocking, and involves several other business titans. For example, Carnegie was bitter rivals with Rockefeller, and also ended up making the biggest business deal in history with JP Morgan. But before all that wealth and drama, we need to travel back to 1835, where a young boy is born into abject poverty. Andrew Carnegie was born in Scotland, which is the reason I'm saying Carnegie instead of Carnegie, because this is how the Scots actually pronounce it. But Andrew's start in life was depressing to say the least. His first home consisted of just one main room inside a small cottage, which the Carnegies shared with another family. Andrew's father was a loom weaver, making cloth by hand, and Andrew had expected he would do the same thing when he was older. But then along came the Industrial Revolution and steam-powered looms, which put hand weavers like Andrew's father out of business. Suddenly, the little income the family had was gone. In order for the family to have enough money to survive, Andrew's mother stepped up and began working extremely long hours repairing shoes for people in the nearby area. Meanwhile, Andrew witnessed his father begging for work, a haunting image that would stick with him for the rest of his life. But it was soon clear that there was no real prospects left for the family in Scotland, and Andrew's mother had heard stories from her sisters in America that the US was the land of opportunity. So in 1848, the family sold all of their possessions and used the money to embark on a one-way trip to America in search of a better life. The family arrived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was a hub for manufacturing, but both of Andrew's parents struggled to find consistent work. So Andrew dropped out of school after just 5 years of education, as he knew the family needed him to find work and provide another source of income to support themselves. At the age of 12, Andrew's father found him work in a cotton mill, working 12 hours a day and making $1.20 per week. Andrew would later reflect that no amount of money ever made him happier than that first paycheck. He felt proud to be helping his family out in some way, and better yet, Andrew was soon promoted to be engineer's assistant, where he stoked the boilers in the textile factory. It was slightly better pay, but the job literally gave him nightmares. He'd wake up sweating that there'd been an accident at the factory and he'd been engulfed in flames. So by the time he was 14, Andrew had found himself another job, this time working as a messenger boy at a local telegraph office. His job consisted of him biking all over the Pittsburgh area to deliver telegrams. Not only did this job pay more, $2.50 per week, but it gave him the chance to meet influential people within the city's business community as he delivered them telegrams. Andrew learned who the most important and influential people in the area were, and made sure to memorize their names and faces so that if he ever saw them in the street, he could say hello. And this strategy worked. Andrew soon caught the attention of a man named Thomas Scott, a regional manager for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, a huge business and the largest railroad in the country. Tom took a liking to Andrew and hired him to be his personal telegrapher and private secretary. Andrew's wages jumped up to $35 per month. But even more importantly, this was a massive opportunity to see firsthand how a major corporation was run. Andrew immediately showed great potential, and thus Tom Scott decided to essentially mentor him. It's believed Tom saw something of himself in Andrew. They'd both started out very poor, but had huge amounts of ambition and work ethic. But for Andrew, this connection would prove to be invaluable, as Tom Scott would later become president of the entire company. And since Andrew was Tom's protege, Andrew advanced up the company's ranks quickly as well. He worked closely with Tom to oversee the railroad expansion. There's no doubt this mentorship played a pivotal role in Andrew's future, and helped him understand the ins and outs of running a profitable business. The two had a close bond, and Tom fondly referred to Andrew as my boy Andy. However, whilst things were looking up for Andrew's future, they weren't for his father. After 7 years in America, Andrew's father died age 51, a broken man, and a victim of the Industrial Revolution. One day, Andrew came home from work to see his mother crying, and he vowed to her then and there he would become rich and take care of her. Whilst Andrew said this with conviction, there's no way either of them could have possibly guessed just how crazy things were about to get. Andrew worked closely with Tom as they developed bigger cars and longer trains, meaning they could cover bigger loads and cut costs. Their railroad was also the first to keep trains moving 24 hours a day. Not only was Andrew learning a lot about business, but also about money. One day, Tom approached Andrew and told him to buy shares of a stock called Adams Express. It very quickly shot up in value, and it was the first time Andrew had made money so easily without doing any actual work. Now, this was blatant insider trading, of course, but Tom instilled in Andrew the idea of your money working for you, rather than you doing manual labor for money like Andrew had been used to. As Andrew continued to rise through the ranks at the railroad company, aided by his mentor, he was becoming increasingly well off. Which meant that when the American Civil War came around in 1861, Andrew paid a substitute to take his place on the battlefield rather than fighting himself. By 1865, when he was 30 years old, Andrew was making more than $50,000 a year. However, Andrew was always looking for that next big opportunity, and so at this point, he decided it was time to leave the Pennsylvania Railroad and head to New York City with his mother, where they got a suite at one of New York's most fashionable hotels. Finally, he could give his mother a true taste of luxury. Once he got to New York, he began managing a business called the Keystone Bridge Company. That's because whilst working for the railroad, Andrew had foreseen the need for iron bridges to replace wooden bridges, and so he capitalized on the opportunity. However, the Keystone Bridge Company didn't just build bridges. Andrew made sure to apply the lessons he'd learned from his mentor and vertically integrate production, meaning they had their own iron mills to produce the iron for bridges rather than relying on iron mining and extraction companies like their competitors. This gave Andrew more control and the ability to cut costs, so he could offer better prices and dominate the market. Not just that, but Andrew had something most of his competitors didn't: connections in the railroad industry. He was able to sell a lot of bridges to rail companies looking to expand their routes thanks to the contacts Andrew had previously made. And one day, Andrew was approached with an intriguing proposition: building the largest rail and road bridge in America at the time, over a mile long, that would span the Mississippi River and connect east to west like never before. This would be a game changer for the railroads, but it quickly became clear why nobody had done this before. A normal bridge would not withstand the Mississippi current. They would need a stronger building material like steel, but at the time it was extremely expensive and difficult to make in large quantities. That's why steel was used for small items like cutlery and jewelry, but certainly not for a huge structure like the bridge Andrew was planning. But Andrew felt convinced that steel was the future. If they could find a way to make steel cheaper, it could revolutionize not just bridges, but all kinds of different buildings. Andrew became fixated on the idea. He looked out across the Mississippi River and could envision his creation. He knew big rewards required risk, and so he threw himself fully into the project and began seeking a way to produce large quantities of steel. He traveled all around the country to different steel mills and chemists to try and learn everything he could. For a while though, it seemed like a lost cause, until someone finally introduced him to an English inventor called Henry Bessemer. Bessemer had created a new way of refining steel from molten pig iron that was much more efficient and cost effective. The Bessemer converter, which was a pear-shaped furnace, allowed for the mass production of steel on a scale never seen before. It cut the time to manufacture a single steel rail from 2 weeks to 15 minutes, something that was previously believed to be impossible, and it was exactly what Andrew needed. It would still be expensive to set everything up, of course, but Andrew saw the potential and invested almost everything he had in this new technology from Bessemer and began to adapt it to his needs. He was willing to invest heavily in building a gigantic steel production plant, something very few other entrepreneurs were willing to take a gamble on. But Andrew just had pure belief in the idea and went all in. Once he'd also got some additional investors to help him finance it, Andrew wasted no time in setting up his first steel mill using these Bessemer converters that could produce large volumes of steel. And after years of grueling work, the bridge over the Mississippi River was successfully built, the first ever steel structure of this size. It was a huge accomplishment, but there was one big problem. Nobody believed a bridge that big across a river was safe. Back then, bridges collapsing was not uncommon, and people weren't used to seeing bridges this size, so Andrew had to prove it was safe. Now, at the time, a popular superstition was that elephants would not walk across foundations that were unstable. So, Andrew had an idea. On the opening day of the bridge, where the public gathered to see what would happen, Andrew arranged for a circus elephant to lead a parade across the bridge. When it crossed successfully, people followed behind feeling reassured, and the bridge was officially open for business. The Eads Bridge, as it's now called, is still there today, built with Carnegie steel. But for Andrew, he was no longer just thinking about bridges. With his new steel mill able to create steel in such large volumes, it was time to start thinking much bigger. Thanks to Andrew's steel mill and the Bessemer process, it was now possible to create large structures from steel. And initially, Andrew's biggest customer was the railroads, since they were eager to replace both their bridges and rail lines with steel now that it was affordable, as it was a stronger and more reliable material. Knowing that the railroads would be such a big customer, Andrew made a very unusual but strategic decision about the name of his first steel mill. Rather than naming it after himself, he instead called it the Edgar Thomson Steel Works, named after the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Andrew hoped naming it after one of the most influential men in the entire railroad business would show his public appreciation for the rail industry and help bring in more customers. And he was right. Almost immediately, Edgar Thomson himself ordered 2,000 steel rails from Andrew's Steel Company. However, part of the reason Andrew was able to produce steel at a more affordable price was that his steel plant was ruthlessly efficient. From his poor upbringings, he'd learned the value of tracking every penny, and this frugality stayed with him as he ran his steel business. His motto was, watch the costs and the profits take care of themselves. Unfortunately, one of the key ways to save money was cutting labor costs and extracting the maximum value from every worker. Thus, Andrew had his employees working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. He gave his men just one holiday per year, the 4th of July. Every other day it was grueling work. Countless workers suffered devastating injuries from the job, and deaths were a common occurrence at Carnegie Mills. Since workers weren't provided much protective equipment or safety measures, as cutting costs was always the priority. Employees were pushed to their absolute maximum, both mentally and physically, and Andrew tried to inspire competition between workers by pitting them against each other. Whilst this did help them produce record amounts of steel, this then became the new standard quota that they were expected to hit every week. If they didn't, they were fired. Needless to say, employee turnover was high as the job broke many of the staff. That worked for Andrew though, as he deliberately made sure the production used unskilled laborers doing repetitive tasks, so that the labor was easily replaceable. As a result, the workers couldn't take any pride or craftsmanship in their work and felt dehumanized. Of course, some context is important. In the 1800s, it's not like Andrew Carnegie was the only one to try and push workers to their limits for low wages. But Andrew definitely prioritized efficiency and cost cutting above all else. And whilst it was brutal for the employees, it certainly was effective. Andrew's relentless drive for efficiency meant his mills were some of the most productive in the entire world. Soon his mill was capable of rolling out 225 tons of steel a day. Andrew Carnegie had found a way to mass produce cheap steel and was fueling the growth of a nation, giving the country all the steel it needed and making himself a fortune. And even though Andrew was strict about the costs, this doesn't mean he wasn't willing to spend big in the short term if it meant improved efficiency. For example, as technology advanced, he was always looking for machines to replace the jobs of people, since machines didn't need sleep. He would be willing to immediately get rid of an entire process or plant or department if there was a more efficient way to do things, and he became known for making quick and ruthless decisions. One example of an innovation Andrew used was to install new systems that improved material handling, including overhead cranes and hoists, which sped up the steelmaking process and therefore boosted the production capacity of his mills. And just like he'd done in the past, vertical integration was always Andrew's goal, ensuring he controlled all the companies in the supply chain. So for example, he wanted to own the supply of raw materials, all the way through to making the steel, and then even transporting the finished goods to customers. By controlling all stages of production, he cut costs even further. Interestingly though, at age 33, Andrew wrote himself a letter vowing to only work for 2 more years, and then devote the rest of his life to benevolent purposes. He wrote, "Simply making more money must degrade me beyond hope of permanent recovery." However, I'm sorry to say that 2 years later, Andrew would not only still be working, but he'd be surrounded by more controversy than ever before. After a very successful start in the steel business, disaster suddenly struck for Andrew Carnegie. His biggest customer, the railroad business, began to face some major problems. They had been building railroads so rapidly that there were too many railroad lines competing with each other, and after the stock market crashed and economic activity slowed, suddenly the railroads didn't have enough business to sustain them. The country was facing a brutal depression around this time, and for Andrew Carnegie, the major problems the railroads were having meant orders from the railroad industry suddenly dried up, as they no longer had the money to buy his steel. This put Andrew in a perilous position himself, as his business model only worked if selling large quantities of steel. However, one man saw all of this as an opportunity he could exploit. Oil magnate John D. Rockefeller. Knowing how desperate the railroads were for more cargo, Rockefeller negotiated a huge discount with them to ship very large quantities of his oil on the railroads at a much lower price. Desperate for money, they agreed at first, but the discount was so high that it became unsustainable and they realized they couldn't survive on the prices Rockefeller was paying. So they tried to renegotiate and find a middle ground, but Rockefeller said no, and instead pulled his oil off the trains completely. Since he was one of the railroad's biggest customers, this made the situation go from bad to worse, and many rail companies went bankrupt. One of those most in trouble was Andrew's old mentor, Tom Scott, who'd invested in multiple railroads that were now struggling badly. And so Tom approached his old protege, Andrew Carnegie, and this time instead of giving help, he was asking for help. He knew Andrew had gone on to become wealthy through the steel business, and he asked Andrew to invest in his struggling rail company so he wouldn't go out of business. You would think Andrew would be very keen to repay his old mentor who had done so much for him, but Andrew turned him down, saying he couldn't help because all of his money was tied up in manufacturing. Tom left devastated, and his business never recovered. He died not long after. The man who had once meant more to Andrew Carnegie than anyone else in the world was now gone. As he stood at Tom Scott's grave in 1881, rain pouring down, Andrew believed one person was responsible for the death of his mentor, Rockefeller. Maybe it was just Andrew's way of not accepting any responsibility himself, but Andrew became convinced Rockefeller drove Tom Scott to his grave, and Andrew wanted revenge. A rivalry was born, the King of Oil versus the King of Steel. Whilst this rivalry was mostly bitter, there was a slightly more humorous side too, as the two men would send each other passive-aggressive Christmas gifts. One year, Rockefeller sent Andrew a cheap paper vest to rub it in that he came from poverty as a poor immigrant. In return, Andrew sent Rockefeller a bottle of fine whiskey, knowing that he completely abstained from alcohol and was a devout Baptist, which meant he couldn't even give the alcohol away. But in many ways, having a rival spurred both men on to be even more ambitious to try and beat the other. Andrew became determined to become wealthier than Rockefeller and avenge his mentor. With the railroad industry going through a tough time, Andrew pivoted slightly when he noticed a new market he could take advantage of. He was witnessing unemployed Americans flooding to big cities like Chicago and New York in search of work. And once again, Andrew saw the future, using steel to build skyscrapers. Since big cities needed more buildings and offices, and steel would allow them to build much taller, more secure structures. So, Andrew's steel company began building tens of thousands of skyscrapers, and very quickly the landscape of America completely changed thanks to Carnegie Steel. This of course meant Andrew's profits began to increase rapidly. But although Andrew was making profits of over $1.5 million a year, his personal fortune was still much smaller than Rockefeller's. He needed a way to become even more profitable, and the good news was that he knew of a man who could help. The bad news was this partnership would have devastating consequences. To help run his steel mills, Andrew brought in a man named Henry Clay Frick, another industrialist who had a reputation as a cutthroat executive known for his ruthlessness. Henry Frick had set a goal of becoming a millionaire by the time he was 30, and he'd succeeded in that. In fact, he was known for getting what he wanted by any means necessary. Whereas Andrew was actually quite thin-skinned and cared about what people thought of him, Frick did not care at all. He was merciless, and Andrew believed a partnership with Frick would give his company the edge it needed to completely dominate the steel industry. While some questioned giving Frick so much power within his company, immediately Frick started to prove his worth. Through fear and intimidation, Frick renegotiated improved contracts with suppliers for Andrew's company. Frick also used his toughness to cut costs further and eliminate waste. But most importantly, by putting Frick as the face of the company, it allowed Andrew to deflect any blame or criticism away from himself. For example, despite record-breaking profits, they decided to cut worker wages even further. But Andrew made out like it was Frick's decision, and it was Frick who delivered the news. Likewise, Frick had a reputation for breaking up unions and stamping out any efforts for workers to band together. And sure enough, most of Carnegie's steel mills had no unions. So basically, Frick acted as a barrier between Andrew and unpopular or controversial decisions. He got Frick to do those kind of jobs like cutting salaries and extending working hours. And thus, as a combined team, Andrew and Frick were a powerful force. One example of their ruthlessness is was what they did to a rival steel plant called Duquesne Steelworks. Duquesne had begun to beat Andrew at his own game, using innovative technology and systems to cut costs. And Andrew was concerned by this competition, and knew it was going to be hard to win in a fair fight. So, with the help of Frick and their combined contacts, Andrew spread a rumor that Duquesne Mill was producing defective steel. He circulated a note to various railroads warning them not to use steel from Duquesne Works because it lacked what he called homogeneity. Now, nobody knew what this term actually meant, but it didn't sound good. In fact, it sounded scary enough that it frightened off many customers from buying steel from Duquesne, as they were concerned about its quality. Now, these rumors that Andrew spread were completely made up, but he knew that if Duquesne's sales slowed enough, they'd become unprofitable. And at that point, Andrew temporarily undercut Duquesne's pricing to quicken their demise. He was willing to make a loss on orders if it meant taking customers from Duquesne and driving them out of business. Within a year or so, Duquesne was in financial ruin, and Frick negotiated a deal for him and Andrew to buy Duquesne Steelworks at a bargain price. Once they bought Duquesne Steelworks, they learned of the techniques they'd been using to drive down costs, and they implemented the exact same process at their other mills. The same process that a few months earlier they'd been telling everyone not to trust. This was just one example of Andrew and Frick doing whatever it took to win. And spreading lies about a competitor was nowhere near the worst thing they did. But we'll get to that. For now, Frick was proving his worth. Profits nearly doubled in the first year of these two teaming up. By ramping up production and slashing costs, Andrew and Frick had the profits to buy out other competitors in the area and open more steel mills, which only saw Andrew's personal fortune rise even higher. By this point, he would have been a billionaire in today's money. However, Andrew Carnegie's reputation with Henry Frick would result in several controversies that would forever tarnish Andrew's reputation that he worked so hard to cultivate. The first disaster came when Frick purchased land in the hills of Pittsburgh and built a private members-only club for the wealthiest men in the country. It consisted of about 50 industrialists, bankers, and influential people. And the most prominent club member of all was Frick's partner, Andrew Carnegie. They called it the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, and since they wanted their own private lake to fish on, they took control of the South Fork Dam, the largest dam of its kind, holding 20 million tons of water. Just 14 miles downriver was a working-class town called Johnstown, consisting mainly of steelworkers and their families. Unfortunately, the club were much more concerned about adapting the dam to suit their own needs rather than worrying about making it safe. Thus, they made changes like leveling off the top to make room for a road, and also lowering the dam by several feet. This completely went against the safety advice they were given. In fact, local officials begged Frick to strengthen the dam, but the club didn't seem to care. They wanted their fishing and hunting club to be perfect. It won't surprise you to hear that in 1889, when a rainstorm came along, the dam breached, sending millions of gallons of water to the towns below. 2,209 people were killed, including 400 children. Bodies would be found for years to come, as many bodies washed hundreds of miles away. The Johnstown flood was the worst man-made disaster in the United States at the time, and the club used their money to ensure they weren't held accountable. Now, it should be stressed that Andrew Carnegie was simply the most prominent member of this club. There's no indication he himself was directly involved in anything to do with the dam, but Andrew did help sweep the whole thing under the rug to protect Frick. And just Andrew's close connection to Frick and his involvement with the club was enough to tarnish Andrew's reputation in the media. There was understandably public outcry over the negligent actions of this ultra-wealthy club whose modifications to the dam had seemingly helped cause this tragedy. And unfortunately for Andrew, this was just the very beginning of the controversies he'd be involved with. Things were about to get much worse. Unrest was brewing amongst Andrew's workers. They were quite rightly feeling like wage slaves with no chance of progression within the company. They were witnessing Andrew's fortune grow rapidly whilst they struggled just to survive. What was most infuriating is that in a public essay, Andrew championed the right for workers to organize into unions, and yet privately, his company constantly tried to squash them. Andrew publicly seemed to be saying all the right things to make himself look good, and then in private, he had Frick do the exact opposite and make life hell for his workers. Another example of this was how Andrew built a library near his first steel mill, which he said was for his workers at the Edgar Thomson Steelworks. But the reality was, his employees worked such long hours they wouldn't get a chance to use it. Not to mention that he employed many unskilled labourers who couldn't read anyway. The library seemed more about his own self-preservation than actually caring for his workers. If he truly wanted to help them, he'd have given them the raises and safety measures they wanted, not a library. But Andrew loved being the good guy, opening libraries with extravagant ceremonies and writing essays on workers' rights, whilst making Frick the face of the unpopular decisions and the scapegoat for his dirty work. Luckily, Frick didn't seem to care much about his own image. In fact, perhaps relished in his ruthless hardman reputation. But since the Edgar Thomson steel mill was such a huge success, Andrew had bought another steel mill, Homestead, and he invested heavily into this new steel plant, enabling it to produce vast quantities of steel. But at first, labour costs had not been optimized, as he put it. Many of the employees were part of a union called the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. However, their contract was up for renewal soon, and given the steel industry was doing well and the plants were so profitable, this union wanted to ask for a wage increase. Obviously, Andrew had no intention of doing that. What he did say was that he was considering building a library near Homestead steel plant if they were good partners, and what he really meant by that was he'd build it if the workers gave up their affiliation with trade unions. The problem Andrew had was that he was trying to rebrand his image from oppressive billionaire to champion of workers' rights. So as negotiations approached with the union, he put Frick in charge to handle it. Andrew told Frick he had his full support to do what was needed. Meanwhile, Andrew decided to distance himself from Frick and the whole union negotiations. He was well aware of Frick's aggressiveness and how nasty this dispute could turn. So in May 1892, Andrew took a long vacation to Scotland, leaving Homestead fully in Frick's hands. Basically, Andrew wanted to publicly distance himself from the situation and give himself plausible deniability if things escalated. But privately, Andrew's message to Frick was clear: do whatever it takes. And thus, Andrew Carnegie, the man who had publicly championed workers' rights and unions, had ordered Frick to crush the union at their plant. Before he left for his vacation in Scotland, Andrew gave Frick one more instruction: increase production levels at the Homestead steel plant even higher before the union contract expired in the summer, which would mean they had a stockpile of material if negotiations failed and the workers went on strike. And indeed, Frick began to squeeze everything he could out of the workers. Work days grew even longer. Despite the fact having such exhausted employees working in a dangerous environment like a steel mill caused more injuries and fatalities. It's estimated 9% of all steel workers industry-wide died on the job. But the Homestead workers were pushed harder than ever, spending half their lives in dreadful conditions for low wages, witnessing their colleagues have accidents or die. They were working longer hours for no pay increase, and the workforce was united. This could not continue. With their current contract about to expire, the union said they wanted a pay increase and improvement in safety conditions. Unfortunately for them, they were dealing with Henry Frick, who immediately countered their proposals with a 22% wage decrease and said that they had to break up the union to continue working at the plant. Just imagine that for a moment. You know how well the owners of the steel plant are doing, but they're now suggesting you work more hours for less money when you're already on very low pay to begin with. But Frick and Andrew believed that when faced with the ultimatum of no work at all, the workers would give in. But they were wrong. The workers decided enough was enough and they refused Frick's demands. The workers actually tried to contact Andrew, since he was the main owner of the mill, and publicly he'd been supporting unions and workers. So surely Andrew wouldn't stand by and let Frick do this, right? But conveniently, Andrew was unreachable from his vacation in Scotland. At least, he was unreachable to the workers and the press. But from his castle in the Scottish Highlands, Andrew was still in communication with Henry Frick. So he was aware of what was happening. He wrote Frick multiple letters in which he said, "Mr. Frick, no doubt you will get Homestead right. You can get anything right with your mild persistence. We all approve of anything you do. We are with you to the end." So privately, it was extremely clear whose side Andrew was on. And with the union not backing down, on June 25th, Frick announced he would no longer negotiate with the union and only deal with workers individually. The union actually said they were willing to compromise on pretty much all of Frick's other demands, but insisted they were allowed to keep their union. However, Frick had no interest in compromises. He wanted to win. So on June 29th, on orders from Andrew, Frick closed down the steel mill and locked the workers out. Both Andrew and Frick believed within a couple of days the workers would buckle and agree to disband their union, and then go back to work with no pay increase. If the workers didn't back down, Frick said he would replace the homestead workers with non-union immigrant workers who would take their jobs. As Andrew and Frick figured, the workers would rather keep their jobs than their union, and some money was surely better than no money. Of course, shutting down the mill for a couple of days wasn't ideal, but remember, Andrew and Frick had already prepared for this, as they'd stockpiled materials in advance by pushing workers harder than ever in the months prior. What they hadn't prepared for was just how united the workers were. They'd reached a breaking point, as they'd given so much of themselves to the mill that they deeply believed they were entitled to at least some of its success. Thus, the workers went on strike, and thousands of Homestead workers seized the mill. They barricaded themselves in front of the Homestead steelworks, preventing Frick bringing in any replacement workers to take their jobs. As a result, steel production remained halted, as the plant was surrounded by striking workers. Of course, Frick was not someone to back down easily. Andrew Carnegie's words were still ringing in his mind: win at all costs. We are with you to the end. And therefore, Frick hired a private mercenary army called the Pinkertons to escort his new immigrant workers to the factory. The Pinkertons were basically hired guns, the muscle to get the striking workers to stop barricading themselves in front of the Homestead steel mill. On the 6th of July 1892, 300 Pinkerton men arrived on barges from across the lake, armed with guns. Of course, Frick's decision to bring in what was essentially a private army meant this quite literally was war. But Frick was confident this show of force would be enough to get the striking workers to give in. However, as the Pinkerton army arrived by boat, workers stationed along the river spotted them and alerted the thousands of strikers that they needed to go and grab any weapons they could from the town. The workers rushed to find anything they could: stones, knives, clubs, anything. And as the Pinkertons got to the shore, one of the striking workers urged them not to step off their barge. They said the strikers had weapons of their own and this would turn ugly. They pleaded with the Pinkertons to simply turn away, but the Pinkertons had their orders from Frick, and the instruction was clear: take back control of Homestead. Now, historians still aren't certain who fired the first shot, but what we do know is that very soon the area surrounding Homestead Steel Mill was filled with the sound of stones, bullets, and cries. The battle had begun. The striking workers rolled a flaming freight train car at the Pinkerton barges. They also tossed dynamite in the river to sink the Pinkerton boats, and pumped oil into the river and tried to set it on fire. In response, the Pinkertons fired their guns and violent chaos broke out. For 12 brutal hours, the battle raged on. During the fighting, it's estimated 9 Homestead workers were killed, 7 Pinkerton army men were killed, and countless people on both sides were injured. So much blood was spilled, and people on both sides lay dead and brutally beaten. But when the fighting stopped, it was the Pinkertons who surrendered. In truth, when Frick had hired them, they'd not expected the workers would put up a fight like this. And somehow, the striking workers had managed to hold their ground. The workers thought they had won, and Frick would now be forced to negotiate with them. But they were wrong. Before we get to the next chapter, it's time to answer a question I get a lot. What music do I use in these videos? And the answer is today's sponsor, Epidemic Sound. I've been using Epidemic Sound myself for years, and that's because I really believe music is one of the most overlooked parts of making videos. When you have the right soundtrack, it can make the video so much more
Ripped up tissue paper can't be a solution. If you want a skin close shave that doesn't take it too far,
You got a loadout drop inbound.
Tap in, tap in, tap in.
I need hella AR bullets then.
Oh,
Try that.
7. Go quick, go quick. We got people top prison.
I'm just gonna take the zip over there.
Where's that?
Where are they at?
20. No.
I made safety. I'm dead.
Oh! Gas is inbound.
On the tower, I think.
Where's that?
You're being tracked by an enemy squad. Evade and survive.
Come on.
Watch out! Thermite!
Mark one.
Good work.
I'm bottom. There's two up top.
Yeah. He's running. He's like on the tower, Eddie.
Coming up.
Alright, your squad's in the safe zone.
Right here, it's me.
Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Yeah, good shit.
I'm dead.
One right here. Just make that.
No.
Yeah, I'm hearing footsteps close by.
Yeah, I'm hearing that.
Are they bottom?
A couple contracts out there have increased payouts. Get to them first to
No, they're
cash
top.
out.
Heard that.
He just jumped, bruh. Where's the tower?
Heard that.
Mark the remaining operators from that squad. Hunt them down.
On the tower.
So I'm trying to get an angle on them. Okay.
Yeah.
20. Other guys 20.
Mark both.
Shit. Your balls.
Marking the rest of that squad on your tac map. Get hunting.
Two guys right here. These two guys look like bots. And there's also people top right there. Bottom. Door. Michael Myers.
Target down.
Yep.
Marking the rest of them.
20. I got 20. Huh?
You made the top 25.
Yep.
Kill confirmed.
Shit.
We located the rest of them.
Get down here.
Okay.
Squad on your tac map. Go get
See ammo?
Yep.
located the rest of them.
Nah.
Okay. I know you're fucking eating the AR, dude. Set the fucking zip right here. Oh my god, we have money.
The enemy is
Buy UAV real quick.
You lost him.
Copy. Mortar strike inbound now.
Let's run at these fools over here.
Gas is closing in. Marking the rest of that squad on your tac map.
That just sounds like a killing
All
machine,
squad
dude.
members are in the safe zone.
You're just running through these fools.
Yeah, I mean, shit rips.
Just like fucking 4 bullets and they're dead.
Basically.
The suppressor, this shit sounds crazy.
You have to hunt down the rest of them.
Damn.
You good? Alright,
I'm
good.
Guys on the roof.
And whoa, whoa, buddy. I'm dead. I'm full dead. Down. Oh, stop.
Where's he at?
Still up here. Still up here. Still up here at the zip.
Keep
Literally on the
down
zip.
to you, soldier.
Like on the
Stay
80
sharp.
kinda. Left. You're on him. He's still up there.
You got reinforcements.
Oh yeah, that guy's sus as hell. I can't even
Oh,
cap.
I can be able to get the fullness. He doesn't have stuff.
You got that. You got that. You got that. You got that.
Fire sale active. Buy station prices have been reduced.
Oh wait.
Your
So,
squad mates redeploy.
Oh, yo, he actually just got slammed.
wait, is he cheating?
I don't know. He could be, to be honest.
Yeah, no bullshit, bro. The way he killed me was actually insane, dude.
He's below.
You go kill his teammates if you want. Yeah, go kill his teammates. It's all you. I'm just looking at this guy. Hey.
This is actually. Oh, I'm dead. Oh, what the hell?
Yo, his teammates in fucking prison, dude. See this guy?
Yeah, this ain't even his teammates here.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish this guy. Oh yeah, this guy's definitely out there, bro. He actually has like an unreleased skin.
Make it count.
What skin?
Look at his skin. It just looks crazy.
Is that not the Terrifier skin?
No, bro. Look at his skin. Look, just go look at it. It's actually insane. It's like a robot skin.
Counter UAV.
Are you sure? I swear that's a Terrifier skin. I was just looking at it.
No, bro. That's not a Terrifier skin.
Copy. Advanced UAV is on station. Scanning for hostiles.
Hey, drop money. I buy bunker.
Gas is
I
moving.
bought one here. I bought both, I think, off that buy, but.
Okay, wait. I'll just buy you reason.
Marking the rest of that squad on your TAC map. Get hunting. Our counter UAV
I want
is
more
active.
events after this.
Your squad made it to the safe zone. Fire sale's over. Adjusting prices.
Alright. There's a million people in prison.
This guy, yeah, this guy's looking at me from the top prison, dude. Wait, is this guy is cheating teammate?
Advanced UAV
Might
is
be.
disengaging.
Watch out for that.
New Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Cream is clinically proven to moisturize for 48 hours.
Enemy soldier incoming.
Can I pop this EV right now,
Marking the
advance?
rest of them.
Yeah.
What's that?
Kill confirmed, and we located the rest of them.
Then I could one in this guy.
Supply crates are restocked. Advise you load up now. High value contracts are on the way.
That's him again.
More reward.
Yeah, I don't like this one too.
Got reinforcements inbound.
He died. He won't respawn unless they buy him. Oh, he's in the tower. Oh my god.
You're good, you're good. He's all the way up top, yeah, he's all the way up top. Right here.
Like that. Just trying to look at us from top.
Ripped him, yeah. He's been trying to do this shit.
Taking top.
You're losing ground. Move it.
Okay,
Just rest
stop on the
somebody in
left.
control, yeah.
Waiting for him. Okay.
One down.
Okay, look
More,
to
or are they
right
on the
side.
left?
Might be on the left.
I don't think these
Yeah,
guys are...
check it.
Okay.
Check it. People in front of us too.
Yeah.
They're like at the doorway. Okay.
Moving to my mark.
Alright, you look at that. I'm just gonna make sure nobody gets. We don't get flanked here. I have a BA2, bro.
Keep your eyes up for prize contracts. You'll earn more buck for your bang.
Look out for this kid.
Moving this way. Disregard.
Is that right here?
Visual on the enemy.
20, nice.
Backing team, I think, now.
Yeah, it is.
Moving this way.
You got gas moving in.
Look on this hazy head, just making sure.
There's a kid over there. Oh, solo there earlier. This kid's working the buy again. One shot.
Not even bothering, to be honest.
shot.
Right. So he's tucked in the corner.
Kid's one.
Running. Oh, got the kill. Fuck me. Go, hopefully south.
Invite this.
Here, take this. Come here.
Damn, I didn't even hit him with that. What
We
the
got a
fuck?
piece right there. Grab this shit. Our teammate gets it. Wait, it's my buddy Cheetah. Hold on. This guy right below us. Live.
Crack this kid on the stairs. I'm knocking my mortar.
This guy's down in his zone. Right, like. Yeah, right here, twin. In zone.
Where?
Right below me.
Moving this way.
Right below me. Live. You can shoot him through the fucking smoke.
You made it to the top 5.
That was definitely a cheater, yeah.
Nice. Yo, 27. That's actually a heater.
Your squad mate's back on station. Good work.
I was already about to loading. Knock 2 on Lodi.
Oh, yeah.
Into the AO. Kill confirmed. We located the rest of them. Your squad mate's redeploying. Well done.
You good?
Yeah, I could these kids.
Well, on the roof. Lodi team. Might be different team. Yeah, it's guns and shit.
Knock them.
Your squad mate's back on station.
On me?
Good work.
One on top.
We're in here.
I'm just getting wallbanged to the whole box.
Gas is closing in.
Both cracked on the roof again.
I need plates, man. Fuck. Nice plates right here. On top of me?
Knocked on the top.
Shit. I'm
Great
taking zip
story.
right after this.
Yeah.
After it.
Your squad made it to the safe zone.
You got the
Good
full
He
kill.
died.
Marking the rest of that squad on your tac map. Go get hunting.
Here, give me money. Gonna buy my secondary.
Hour 35, that's a personal best.
Let's go.
Let's go! Wake up, Addison. Big day, new city.
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
We'll just rock this dude's guns. Still above us.
Where's that? Yeah, second floor, I think. Yeah, definitely second. Barn. 20. You call that?
Find someone else.
Oh, man.
It's all on you. Stay alive so your squad can redeploy. You got a loadout drop inbound.
Dude, that teammate, bro, he's horrible.
Your squad mate's redeploying. Well done.
Bombs for what? We're not even shooting back, bro.
Load out crate here.
This boy common.
Yeah, he's calming mad like he's good. Take me up.
Couple contracts
I know
out
how to
there
play the
having
game,
increased
bro.
payout.
He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, like, yo, you go for the res right now. I'm like, dude, I know what I'm doing, bro. He's like, yo, please don't die, please don't die. I'm like, bro, I'm hitting my trades. Oh, I'm so close. Oh, fuck. He's bottom left. He's barely staying angle on him.
Bottom left.
Yeah, like right here. Man.
They have a bunker over here.
Right.
Can't look, there's a bunker.
Full team, full team, full team. Look at that. I'm looking at your top, right? Live. 3 though, watch out, man. Guy's weak. I'm getting shot from grandma. Hold up. I mean, there's a guy on me too, bro. What?
Down. Stay alive to bring them back.
Got this whole team here.
He just working those kids.
I should have shown them all.
Oh my god, yo, top.
Top what?
Yeah, top right here.
Scratch that. Move in here.
Actually, and then grandmas, they're fighting. So this guy's on the heady, and then this guy's kids grandmas. Shit. I gotta focus. It's just in front of you.
Oh my god.
Shit, man.
Got one on the roof. There's 2 more.
I think that's it. Okay. Made that. Yeah, he's running. He's bottom, running into apartments.
Got gas moving in.
Keep all day bottom, different team.
That boy was shying.
All right, your squad's in the safe zone.
Target spotted.
You get floating.
Heard that.
Be advised, UAV is
5
Be
teams?
advised, there's an enemy squad gunning for you.
Yeah, you get up there. Bonnie's probably grandma's, if I had to guess. There, weak. Dead. I cracked the other guy too. It's two. Two in front of you.
Fucking thermites, dude.
Weak.
Be advised, UAV is exiting the AO.
Focus on that guy, this guy's running. He's on me. Ran into this building.
You up there or what?
In green now. He's running up top.
There's another one on the fucking roof.
20.
Fire sale active.
Oh my god, I slammed him.
Good kill. Marking the rest of that squad on your tac map. Get hunting.
Do I lose that? Oh yeah.
Confirmed. We located the rest of them.
Custom weapon here.
Grab those drones too. Get some fucking money.
Get ready. Resurgence window's about to close. Got a swarm of spy drones on our ass. Shut them down.
Disregard the fooling. Disregard that.
All drones neutralized. That's what I like to see.
Anybody UAV or no?
Already bought one.
Fuck. We bought 2, bro. Fuck it up, man.
Be advised, UAV. Enemy destroyed. Use your tac map to hunt down the rest of them. Your squad made it to the safe zone.
Oh, I'm dead.
I'm dead too. Oh my god.
Oh man, what the?
Supply crates are restocked. Advise you load them.
Alright, that kid. Green money.
Here.
I like gold chest, bro. What the fuck? Oh, it's on the vault.
Oh, makes sense. Try to win this shit. Should get a 20. I think people tapped out right now. Oh,
All squad members are in the safe zone.
20.
Oh, let's do this.
They have a trophy.
Yeah, I got. Knock one. 20 on the other guy.
Got knocked.
I'm going.
Got the full too.
Got you full.
Hostile airstrike near your location.
Strike.
These guys got landed on or some shit.
Yeah, no. Look at the building we came from. Just take a wreck.
Knocked. Stop.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm getting the full. No. You just shoot through that shit.
Keep your eyes up for
this guy's ammo.
contracts. You'll earn
Tap in. Just stay right there. Just break the trophies.
I'm about to go in the tower.
For that.
Should we kill these guys?
One more. Yeah, one more. This last gate right there. Weak. He's probably rezzing.
Yeah, I can't see him.
On that. You can probably wallbang that maybe. Try it.
Don't know.
Just land it back.
I can kill the kid. I landed back.
I bet. Play you.
Get.
We just hold these fools, bro. These fools are dead. Nice.
Trying to wallbang me?
You're so fucked. Right? Bunker, you
I got bunkered. Oh, you got bunkered.
Yeah, I got bunkered. 5. I died from control. I'm good. I'm blue, I believe.
Oh.
Got bunkered again, bro.
Oh, I'm dead to that.
Oh, I'm dead. I'm probably dead. Oh my god.
I'm not dead.
But you 10. Just looking like customs out here with these streaks.
Oh, I died to the mortar.
Good. We just got slammed. Wait, he just killed him. There's one more on him though.
High value contracts are in play. More risk, more reward.
Did he get that full?
Yeah, he did. There's just one solo there. He could probably play the buy too. I give you pings. Just jump. There's this guy right here in the smoke. One floating. And then one on the road right here. Live. This guy right here.
All the kids in the tents.
Okay. Yeah, he's behind the red crate. All right. There's two on the road. Just two.
I cracked one of them.
Okay.
Got
And
combat
one's
scouted.
right next to you, one's right next to you in the smoke. Super close, man.
Dude, I'm just getting shot to smoke, dude. Oh my god, bro, the tents, dude.
Less than 5 was loadout drop headed your way.
Take it.
Question recon flyover.
They were fighting right here. You can just land there and not break your legs.
Enemy here.
Okay. Well, I mean, you killed him.
I did kill him. One's running at me.
Enemies dropping into the
He just naded me.
I take care of my people.
Low dude, man.
Everybody's lying in the tower, bro. Oh my god, he's in the building next to the tower, dude. He climbed up.
Good shot.
the area. Watch the skies.
I sold there, no? You got your shit or not?
Hell nah, bro. My gun fell between the crack.
Here, he just buy it here. Drop your money.
Here. Marking the rest of them.
Moving here.
Hella people landing back.
Hostile Guardian is active. Enemy precision airstrike. Find cover.
Enemy soldier incoming.
What to try landing on you?
killed him or what?
No.
It's actually insane from this guy who already tried to land on me. Alright, below me.
Friendly loadout drops on the way. Contract failed. Objective lost. Supply cache locations are resecured. We lost that contract. Good kill. Marking the rest of that squad on your TAC map. Get hunting.
Oh, bro, this guy fucking hacking?
Good spin.
You'll earn more buck for your bag.
Ah.
Hey kids, what do you call the NordVPN Black Friday deal? The Block Friday deal.
Kill confirmed. We located the rest of them.
Target spotted.
Enemy marked.
Deep boy in here.
Read that.
Cash here.
Yep, running.
Target right here.
You got reinforcements inbound.
Yeah, same floor as us.
Moving.
He's volleyballing my shit.
Knocked him on the roof.
Nice.
Someone's in the window.
Where's that? Got this guy. Guy in the window right now.
Gas is closing in.